just wanted you to know what was happening. And
It's the information we're on. I love it.
and this is the third or fourth time I've done it.
You know, we read Karen the Taylor Grace message. I read it very well. It took us all night.
That's painful.
I know, but it was interesting stuff.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had never, and we'd have people say, well, the Taylor Grace had it. No, I got to read it for ourselves and see what we had some crazy. You know, that's hard.
Some crazy person.
It was this close.
Oh, that's one of the reasons I put this together.
I was talking to you. That's the reason.
Good. That's why after this letter, I went back into HB 224 section 5.
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah. Good. Well, you know, this was. This is the right.
Well, we are not in
No, we're not.
and we do not submit this for the county council, which is just dead ass wrong. But I'm gonna ask that.
You're living in Utah, son.
Well, no, this is
Get
like,
over it.
no, this is like
Well,
bad people doing
Or
bad things.
it'll get explained how I am wrong.
Well, not necessarily.
I don't think we're
People making
Hi, Marcy.
Hi, Gavin.
How's Grandma today?
Grandma's good. Good. I hope the things we need to consider are in here.
Hey, you're walking better, bud. Is it a red day?
It's a red day.
All right.
We gotta wear our colors for the roots.
For your utes.
That's right.
Hey, you. How you feeling?
Sore but good.
Jeremy, can you tell it's done what it needed to do?
Oh yeah. Nerve pain was gone right after surgery. So I mean, everything that it was doing, as far as like pinching that nerve and pinching my spinal cord, gone.
Before it permanently damaged.
Well, I got a little
Tingle.
I got a little nerve damage.
But
my
that can come
finger.
back if you still
And
got
that's
it.
I mean, it's like a millimeter every month.
Right,
They
but
can
you
come
should
back.
get full function back.
So I'm
It's not
hoping-
like you've been on chemotherapy. for
Right.
18 months.
Right. So I'm hoping like, that
Whoa.
nerve damage that was done is repairs itself.
Dangerous.
But other than that,
I am big and dangerous.
I mean, it's like just
So
having
how
a
long do you
stranger's
have to
finger.
lay low?
So I cannot.
Did you get me one too?
So
No, I didn't.
4 months after surgery, I can't lift anything for 4 months after surgery, so I got 3 more months. I can't lift anything over 10 pounds. And I have a year before I can go like on a boat or anything that really jars your spine.
I had the
No
same
horseback
thing.
riding.
No horseback riding, no heavy weightlifting or anything like that for a while. So no jogging, no running.
Nothing where you can fall.
Yeah, nothing where I can fall or I impact my spine. But I've been swimming every other day, so I can walk, I can do that, so, and I'm finally getting there. I mean, I get a little tired and sore, and it's weird, you know, like, my range of motion's starting to come back, so
Good to see you.
it's good. Yeah, good to be here.
How's-
It was the 14th of August, so it's been a little over a month, and then,
That's great. That's 6 weeks. That's really good.
so, pretty good. I mean, what was crazy was, I felt better right after surgery than I felt going into surgery. Physically.
Well, you
Like physically, the pain and everything that I was experiencing. It was, and so when I woke up, I was like,
Whoa!
let's go. I'm ready to go home. And they were like, no.
Would anyone like a Reese's peanut butter cup?
No.
yeah.
No Satan.
This is how
Yes. No.
They won't even accept bribes.
Jeremy,
Look at the size of you. You can eat those.
You guys are so good. You don't even accept bribes of
I
chocolate.
kind of tapered. I didn't gain any weight, but I didn't lose any weight because I couldn't be active.
I'm off the
But
sugar.
I'm back.
You're off
I've
the
lost
sugar?
3 pounds this week.
Ruth,
So
no one's gonna help me.
can you walk?
No, you're on your
Walk
own.
and you
On
can
your
walk.
own.
it just,
You have much loss of range of
Can't
motion?
lift
so I can't lift anything.
anything. Everything's
last time we
heavier
met
than
and now
a gallon
this.
of milk.
Yeah.
Even your tug
I've
of your
given you
truck
guys
is
a-
Oh,
heavier.
I got my wife.
Is Bob not gonna
I gave her the
He's
coach.
coming.
She's
coming.
Poached her.
I saw him, he was just pulling in.
Relented
Oh, I
this
saw him.
week
There he
to
goes.
let me drive.
Cool.
So I finally told him, I'm busy enough now that it's not good, like, I need to be able to have my own vehicle. So the doctor released me to drive after a month, and Nicole made me wait.
He's like a movie star.
My husband
Bob.
went through that, and I told her, I said, when he gets
Your sunglasses.
brave and wants to start lifting, you just yell at him and say, it's my quality of life too, because if you whine for the next 50 years, I gotta listen to this now.
So she's on top of me.
Amen.
And I don't rock that
She
boat.
needs to be.
I don't rock.
We have somebody coming over the phone or telephonically?
No.
No. Oh, it's just Gavin? Everybody's here.
No, it's just,
Gavin's here.
hopefully it won't rain. Everyone has their packet?
No.
No, he's here. I have to tell him Mark. He walked in just ahead of us.
Thank you.
I seen him coming in the hall.
I'm stealing it from Gavin, 'cause I think he's got his own.
Oh, Gavin, you gave it to me. I just took it.
Well, I gave it to Gavin, because I went and got one, and thought maybe he needs one.
You watched the game last night?
It's all right, even if they
Oh yeah, and I will for the rest of my life. I got 4 vertebrae fused.
Much time off for that.
Right,
You surprised me.
right. It's what it is. Or
Yeah.
I'm afraid to make a left turn if there's no light on Main Street or anything. Because it's hard.
I'll let him
to
know.
get blind spot, so I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go around the block. I'll just go take it.
Is the range of motion definitely different?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, it is what it is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
What'd they say about stretching that?
So I'm not supposed to do physical therapy.
Stretching your neck.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
No, I meant just push,
Yeah.
trying to move.
So naturally, if it hurts, stop.
Okay.
They won't do PT with me until November. Middle of November. That's when they'll give me a list of PT things to do. But it's weird, like,
3/4
they're like, no halos, we used to do halos for this surgery, we don't do that anymore.
All right, the time is Friday, September 27th, 2019. Time is 12 p.m. We're going to call to order the Grand County Change in Form of Government Study Committee regular meeting. Walt, would you lead us in the pledge? If you'd like, please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, first up, our approval of the minutes. Everyone should have received a copy of the minutes, and they are the September 6, 2019 Study Committee regular meeting minutes. Do we have any changes by chance?
Just move their approval.
Okay. And
Second.
no changes. So we got a approval of the minutes with no change. A second made by Jeremy Day. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously.
Is that your vote too, Walt?
Walt?
Say aye there.
Perfect. Moving to general reports. Item B, review and discussion of county attorney report as to compliance of the draft optional plan with the state constitution and state code continued from September 6, 2019. Discussion between the study committee and Attorney Gavin Anderson. Ms. Salone, County Attorney Salone.
How do you want this to go down? Should we talk about each
Yeah.
population? Should we focus on districting? What do you guys want to do?
If we could go item by item, and then if people would keep their comments towards just each particular item, and then we can do an overall at the end.
Start with last,
And
work our way forward like we did last time.
Yeah,
reverse
that's-
chronological.
I was gonna propose that as well, but to stick with the order you guys took last time, I did read your minutes. I read all the articles in the paper. It seemed like quite the interesting conversation. I'm sorry I couldn't be here at the last meeting. So, you guys know I found 4 violations. Let's start with the removal of officers issue. There's 3 processes under law for removing officers. One is in the Utah Constitution, one is in this mental health statute that you guys discussed last time, and one is in the judicial removal process, which was the one of three that was referenced in the optional plan. It was discussed, that's a clear violation. It was discussed at the last meeting, and certainly Gavin Anderson and I, who stayed very much in contact for the 2 weeks before I finalized the report, as I did with Chris, he argued, can't you make a de minimis finding, a de minimis violation finding, and let the plan go through? And I said, that's not what the statute says. The statute says the plan can go forward if there are any violations of state statute or Utah Constitution. This is one, and I know that Gavin said it to you guys last time too, where he gave to lost focus. It's a substantive issue, but it's an easy fix. And I do agree, I mostly agree with his recommendation he's made you, which is similar to the recommendation I made. I also want to remind you that in state law, I have to review this thing. I have to determine whether there are any violations, and then I have to make recommendations. So the statute mandates that I do all those things. So I've also made recommendations, as has your attorney, Anderson. I would like to see the revision actually say, except as permitted by state law. By leaving, he has proposed, except by the removal process set out in state law. It refers to a singular process, so I still don't, I'd rather just see it even more general than that, except as permitted by state law. That's my recommendation. Stick with that. Second, I think we should go questions after each issue. Does that make sense? Are you
Yeah,
okay with that,
definitely,
Chair?
definitely.
Do you guys have any questions on that issue? Okay. Next, special election. Chris and I might get into it a little bit on this one. The special election process is clearly set out in state law, and the county council or the county legislative body needs to do that. Chris last time discussed this opinion of the lieutenant governor's office. I disagree with Chris on what the lieutenant governor's office said. They said that yes, the optional plan can run in a special election, meaning a municipal year like today. It didn't say that HB 224 establishes a special election, and the lieutenant governor's office also didn't say, and you don't need your council to establish the special election date, which is clearly set out in state law. So again, an easy fix, just remove the date. So Attorney Anderson has two proposals for you as potential edits. He puts in November 2nd, 2020. I got the same issue. I don't want a date in there because it's establishing a special election date, or arguably establishing a special election date. And that process is reserved solely to the county council. So I'd like that to see, and you guys discussed this, it was in the minutes. So Attorney Anderson has already proposed this to you, but as it would read, of its approval at an election to be held in Grand County at the next regularly scheduled general election, or something similar. Take the date out of that. There's no usurping of power of the council's ability to establish the special election. Any questions on that one?
Bob?
Well, just a statement, this particular issue has been litigated in the 7th District Court here in Berry County. And Judge Halliday, presiding at that time, agrees with me.
Yes, and I actually was co-counsel with Steve Russell on that case, so thank you, because I had actually forgotten that, but yes, we went through the same issue in Diana Carroll's day. And the citizens group sued the county over the special election issue. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
I'm sorry. Do we want to leave out the date entirely, and can we leave out regular election? It's possible that the legislature will decide this winter to allow this matter to be decided at a special election. It seems to me there ought to be even some general language there that would allow it to move forward sooner if the legislature decides that's the way to go.
I think that's a great point. And
So what
Attorney Anderson-
are we talking about the vote on the plan itself or the election of officers?
The vote on the plan.
Plan.
So that, if it happened next year, it wouldn't be a special election anyway.
But he's
That's
saying
right.
that, the legislature has made it known, they worked on a bill last year with Representative Lyman, it's expected to run again with a more senior representative this year. Is another change in form of government bill, which apparently happens most years anyway. So it could be that they tinker it and allow a special election. We don't know.
Which conceivably
do
could
you
let us
put-
vote on the plan next spring and elect officers next fall.
Cricket, then Jeremy.
I think that that's a possibility, to try to have this, allow for a special election, to retweak that bill so that they can have one in the spring, so that we don't have to wait 3 years or 2 more years to get our new form of government underway. So I would definitely leave it general, just in case, so we don't have to come back here.
What
Jeremy, then
that
Chris?
what that may look like is more along the lines for counties that are out of compliance will be able to have a special election for the change of government. That may be what it looks like if
All right.
that proceeds to go forward legislatively.
Well, I'll have
So-
to check. I was under the impression that special elections were always in November, but I'll have to double check that. And so it would be a special election under the circumstances of if the county were to run an election in a municipal cycle in November, then it would be a special election. I'll have to look and see, but I suppose the state legislature can do anything they want.
Well,
And so-
and Chris, the case to which I was referring, Judge Halliday found that the county council, not the clerk, had the authority to call a special election, but the Judge Halliday was very clear that the council, if it chose, could call a special election on the primary date.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, so maybe just leave dates out of it altogether.
Yeah, and then Gavin, maybe make it even more general, maybe even refer to the statute. An
As
election
allowed
as
by
permitted,
statute, yeah.
right, something like that.
And I mean, the way that the statute reads right now, at the point in time that our attorney provides a favorable report, it shall be put on the next general election. And so it's true that you don't need a date on there at all, because regardless of when that happens, it already establishes the date as being the next general election after the attorney provides a favorable report.
Right.
Mr. Anderson?
I think I mentioned this when we were discussing this. Salt Lake County, we get a request, 2 or 3 times a year, now what date did we change our form of government? And I just had that exact request just 3 weeks ago. I have to go back to our optional plan to find out when we did. I've been around a long time, but I can't remember even what year it was held. So, to just say the next general election date really doesn't add anything of value. It'd probably be better to just simply leave it silent if you're not willing to put a specific day or year.
Okay,
Other
I think
comments?
we're all in agreement on that. Okay, and then the big one, districting.
We've got, don't we have,
No, we have one more.
Oh, right. Okay, this one's sort of the most nuanced. And in my opinion, this provision at your section 2.125 contradicted or expanded the powers of the executive branch over the legislative branch that's set forth in Utah Statute 1752A204. There are some ways the council can put limitations on the executive branch, and I set these out. And so I really like this change that Gavin's given you on 5B1 to say nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit the council from engaging in any of its responsibilities. Well, actually, okay, responsibilities is set out in this plain our state law. So I want it to, my recommendation was like, let's just adopt this exact language from the state statute. And so this is about a separation of powers issue and potential power battles. I think it's very important to clarify, but also protect the legislative power of the council going forward. But it's also set out in state law to do that. I give you all those provisions in my in my report. So my proposal was just, hey, let's just use the language from 1752A 2043. Gavin has given you some edits. I think they look good. I actually do, though, now that I'm looking at this again, I'm going to want 5B1, the responsibilities. I don't know, I think if we don't just adopt the language in that one section, I'll want to think about whether that's consistent with it. But, you know, one of the issues here was contradicting other places in the optional plan with 5B2. That, you know, a contradiction within your own plan doesn't make it a violation of state law. The problem was that it violated this 1752A 204, which, by trying to expand executive power. This is the most nuanced of the issues. Again, a quick fix is just adopting the language in that one statute, or we can wordsmith the edits like what Attorney Anderson has proposed.
Comments, questions?
I'd love it if you and Gavin would wordsmith this.
Yes, and I did intend to get around to looking at these edits earlier this week and be in touch with Gavin, but I didn't have a chance. So I looked at these about 10 minutes ago. But they're, you know, they're pretty easy fixes, so we will do that.
Other comments on this section? Seeing none? We'll move on.
Okay, now we get to districting. Okay, so districting is a constitutional issue, and it goes back to a fundamental right that is set forth in the Constitution, U.S. Constitution, state constitution. Any constitutional powers have to be expressly delegated in state statute. So those are expressly delegated in Title 17, which is your county issue. And it says the counties may divide the county into districts, they may create districts, and they may change districts. So that's very express language, and it's described 3 different ways. In HB 224, it says that the study committee may specify whether there will be districts. It doesn't say the study committee may divide the county into districts. It doesn't say the study committee may create districts, and it doesn't say the study committee may change the districts. It says that it may specify the districts. I have been tuned into districting law because of the huge Navajo Nation case that's been going on for 6+ years in San Juan County that the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals just made their ruling on, and everyone's expectation is it ends there. It's not going to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that case, and if you read through, and there's 3 different cases, right, as it made its way up. It was in the local district court, went to the Utah Supreme Court, and then it went to federal court. I've read all 3 of those, and if you read through those, it has a whole lot of language about protecting the power to district and redistrict to states and counties. Now, there's also 2 other really, and I make the point in the memo that you guys are a recommending body. The legislative action happens when the voters adopt the plan, or whether here the council has to help implement certain parts, here the districting. This has happened 2 other times recently in Utah history, one of which is in San Juan County. So the people had no power to help San Juan County or help the Navajo Nation redistrict. The Navajo Nation did not have the power to redistrict. They had to rely on the county, the court, the state. The court ended up setting up a redistricting commission that all they could do was recommend to the county how to redistrict, because it's a county power. The same thing has happened at the state level with this Utah Redistricting Commission that passed in 17, I think, or so. It is the same thing. It's a recommending body. It passed by voter initiative to create the commission, but the commission has no power to redistrict. All they can do is recommend to the state or to the county. It's actually the state there. And then the state legislature then takes those recommendations to redistrict. So when you read the whole, and you know, I respect Chris tremendously. Of course, I respect Gavin tremendously. But when you read the statute, and reading the statute, which is clear, black and white, in my opinion, that there's no power delegated there. But reading the statute is one thing. But when you look at the bulk of constitutional law, that's a whole other thing. And you know, it will surprise you to know that attorneys are not all knowing. But most of us, we have our little niches, and that's what we focus on, and that's where our expertise is. And unless, for example, Attorney Anderson has had a big constitutional case on his mind, this is not something necessarily he would have been tuned into. Of course, I agree with him. Other counties have done it where they're optional plan redistrict, absolutely. That doesn't mean it's the right way. So I feel strongly that it is illegal for us to redistrict in this optional plan. I absolutely appreciate your work. The council really likes your districts. I don't think there's going to be any issue with getting your districts passed, and the right way to do it is recommending what those districts are, but it can't be included as an absolute. The other thing I think that's important here is that more underscores how important it is that the legislative body is making this action, is how the districts and the precincts work together, because precincts now will become important because we'll be doing partisan politics, and precincts will help establish who the candidates are and become another fundamental aspect of the right to vote. It's also clear under very similar statutes that only the county legislative body has the power to create the precincts. The precincts and the districts have to work together, and our precincts haven't been updated since at least 1992 are illegal from my reading of them. I haven't dug into all the numbers, but they do appear to be illegal at this point because they haven't been updated as we've grown and everything. And so when you think about it too, how important that process is of vetting the two together, it helps you understand why this needs to happen at the legislative level.
I think on the Navajo Nation, the case out of San Juan County is probably a poor example, because the reason why they didn't go forward is because two of the sitting members decided not to. And I think the Rucho case out of the Supreme Court, I think that's, I don't want to say that they're a great example of this because of kind of the conflict behind it. So I don't know if the individuals here know what exactly happened in San Juan County. And that for me is questionable, because I think they could have appealed it to the Supreme Court and done something else.
The U.S. Supreme Court, so you think they would overrule all three lower cases?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, the language in there is really good, and it's the same language as upheld by all the courts, so I absolutely disagree. And actually, I don't know that it wasn't appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court and they didn't take it. I don't know.
They didn't go for it.
They didn't appeal.
Questions on districts for Ms. Long? Walt, then Bob?
Yeah, a couple of different things. So you're saying that the only thing we can do in this process is to recommend two districts and suggest that one be rural and the other urban?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate enough.
I mean, that's the extent of what we can do with this committee.
Right. You're a recommending body, yes.
Bob, then Walt? Or, I'm sorry, Bob, then Jeremy?
I have
Oh, so, sorry.
another thing that I'm confused about as it relates to we're an advisory body, and I've tried to find out what that means. We're an advisory body or whatever. We're a study committee that's provided for in legislation in HB 224 if the voters trigger it. And in several instances, both in the calendar of events that have to occur and in a memo you sent to us on the 10th of August, you talk about the fact that the council needs to approve our plan. First of all, I don't think we're an advisory committee. I think we are a legislatively authorized committee that the voters initiated, and the only people, other than you looking at it for sufficiency legal-wise, that have a say in this process are the voters. That's all. So I don't understand why it says it has to be in the council packet by a certain date, why the council would be.
That was incorrect. And I was trying to respond to some quick requests for information, and I didn't spend enough time with statute. With this, I spent a month of my time.
There is no provision, though. My question is.
There's no provision that requires the council to approve before it goes to the voters.
Okay, because I spent a lot of time going back to 224 trying to find out where in the world that says that, because it didn't seem. So the only thing we could have done differently is made that recommendation or gone with all at-large members, and then we wouldn't have had a problem.
Oh, we have 3 other violations.
No, I mean, as far as, we're dealing with this particular
Right.
issue right here.
So say what?
We
say
would
your
have,
comment.
if we'd have gone with 5 at-large or just recommended
Right.
3 at-large in 2 districts, an urban and a rural, we'd have been okay.
Well, and part of my issue is the Exhibit A, so I don't want to see Exhibit A in there, but I don't
What
have
is
an
it? Exhibit A being the maps.
the map. And so, I'm looking at Gavin's,
Can we say rural and urban?
I'll need to think on it more. I've
It's a
just seen this for
recommendation.
10 minutes, but
But, I mean-
right, it is a recommendation, and so I do think, I really believe the recommendations need to go in the recommendations report and not in the optional plan. But I also, since it is a recommendation, it's, and those, then I don't think there's an issue there. But again, I've looked at this language for 10 minutes, so.
Bob?
I went back to the law, 1752A 201C, which says members of the county commission are, it's describing the duties and the responsibilities and authority of this group. And we can state whether the members of the county commission are to be elected from districts at large or by combination. So clearly, we can say 3 at large, 2 by district in the plan.
Right.
I guess my question is, can we move Exhibit A to the recommendations, or do you want?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah.
Also, I just want to mention, I've spoken to several county council members, and everyone I've spoken to thinks what we did was great, and they look forward to adopting it, the districting. So, and I've gone so far as to ask them whether or not they'd be willing to go on the record with a resolution expressing their intent to, insofar as possible, follow our recommendations on districting. And I'm quite confident they'll be happy to do that. Because again, I think we did a great job. I think it's really, given the 3 and 2 split, it's the only real rational way to go. So I'm hopeful that this is a distinction maybe without a difference in terms of the final outcome. So I'm not, at this point, myself too exercised about it. And I do trust that Gavin and Chris and county attorney have arm wrestled extensively about this issue, so I'm not anxious to jump into that fray. I don't think we have the standing to.
Jeremy?
I definitely understand where Christine's coming from when she's looking at the expressed authority that we have as a body. But I also think there's implied authority within that HB 224. And there is one expressed, very, very black and white caveat in HB 224 that I'd like to address, and that is the de facto county council is to stay out of the process,
I don't
the
see-
current
can you-
government.
Can you give me a site?
I will pull it up for you, Bob, and email it to you, but I don't have HB 224 in front of me, but it is pretty clear that there is, to the county council is to, once that process is initiated, whether by the voters, which didn't happen in our process, or by the fact that we are out of state statute, which is what initiated this process, that the current sitting government is to hand that over to the study committee that is formed. So, I understand that, and I have pretty good promises from legislator that they will clear that up in HB 224 when that happens, that it will come. So I'm left with the question now is what guarantee, with the work that we did and everything else, what, if the council gets involved and they set those districts, will it violate HB 224?
No.
Not at all.
No, so let me unpack, so you made 2 points. So one is there an implication of power? This is a constitutional issue. You cannot delegate by implication a constitutional right. So no, by law, long-standing, 100 years, U.S. Supreme Court can't do it. So it had to be expressed. So yes, the legislature can clean it up. It's not in the version we're working with now. And then 2, Okay, yes, the study committee has certain powers, and the county council must defer to that. But there also can't be a violation of constitutional law in doing so. So the way the structure is set up now is there was no express delegation to redistrict. That's a power that's reserved to the county council. It can work well enough. I mean, and that's something Chris and I talked about. Like, well, how awkward is that? Like, how this process works. And I'm like, that's not my problem, really. But let's play it out. I mean, the county council is going to have a year to work out their districts. They can begin the process and have all their public hearings before this vote happens. We can all know what those districts are going to look like, although technically the vote does need to happen after the optional plan election.
So what would be your proposed mechanism that we put, that basically if we can say rural, urban districts, what would be the mechanism? We sign it off, approve it, give it to them, they'll gerrymander, or they'll select it however they want to pick it out. They'll write up the districts, and then they approve it, and then it's just added to the optional plan, or does it come back to us? What's the kind of roadmap?
No, it will happen the way I see it going down, and this is not something that Gavin and I have talked about too much, a little bit we talked about. The way I see it going down is the council will begin that process. They can go through the public hearing prior to this election, but they should not adopt new districts until the optional plan is approved. Because let's say it's not approved, then we're going to be going through a whole different process.
So if it is approved, then what happens? It's just merely added?
Then, then the council will create the new districts effective after the election, and then we'll have new districts that will be in place prior to the next election. It doesn't have to ever get integrated. It's a separate thing.
Which
Judy?
is the point.
Does, in your mind, does the county council have to have a public hearing process to redistrict? And is there like 3 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever, kind of like you do with land use code? Are you looking at times?
I have not gone deep into that process, but I would assume it is a public hearing, which is notification. Ruth, you can probably speak to that better. There's a prior notification, then our council policy is to hold public comment open for 2 weeks before voting.
It's a 10-day notice, at least one notice in the paper, in this case maybe 2 weeks in a row notice of a public hearing, and then, actually it's more like 1 week that they leave it open, but they can,
Okay.
they can choose to vote on it that night if they suspend the rules, or they could leave it open a month, whatever they wanted to do. The standard is 1 week.
They can choose to have it in October next year.
Right, they could do the public hearing in October and then vote the first meeting after the election.
After the election of the optional plan.
Yes,
On the districts. So the optional plan comes first and then the districts.
it would have to, because we can't create 2 new districts, and then if it fails.
The public hearing process goes after the election.
No, the public hearing process can begin. They should not vote and create the new districts until after the election. And so I'd encourage them, yes, start the process before the election.
But
Walton Cricket?
Yeah, I didn't understand that either. This council will set the new districts?
The county council, our county
The
council.
existing one?
Yes,
Yes.
And that would be right after the election that says we accept this proposal?
that would be when the vote occurs.
And before the next people are elected?
Yes,
But the next group could come in then, if they wanted to, and change that?
yes.
Okay.
Cricket, then
I just
Bob?
want to be sure.
Well, I don't know what the rush would be for to hurry up and set the districts right after they got approved or not approved. You've taken 2 years. Why not take 2 years to figure that out? Because it'll be that long before there's a municipal election that you can even vote for them anyway. So that's kind of like it's like us wasting all this time doing all the districts and for not. So like that would be, why jump the boat when you're looking at 2 years out, or at least a year? Because you could figure out your districts before people even figure out to run, because if it's on the next election, you're still not going to be able, according to the law, be able to have the new people voted for unless it's a gubernatorial or a presidential. So you're still 2 years out. That's why we worked so hard to get it on this election, was to not have to kill 2 years.
Bob, then Marcy?
I'm afraid I agree with you.
Yeah, it's against our religion. We need to move apart.
But I would encourage the council, the current council, not to adopt districts as a lame duck council,
Yeah,
but in fact, to wait till the new council member is elected in
But they don't have a choice, Bob. If we go to districts, they don't have a choice because Chris needs to know what those
Yeah.
districts are.
Well,
Do that
You
for
still
the
could have another year.
declarations of candidacy.
Still have a year.
Yeah, and
Judy, then Chris. Or sorry, Marcy, then Chris.
Can I just continue a second? And I'm not sure, as a matter of practicality, that it even is possible. I mean, I think everyone's fear is gerrymandering. I don't see how you can gerrymander two districts. But that would be a question to ask Bill Cooper.
there's a will, there's a way, by
Years.
golly.
Oh,
You
you're
don't know
right.
how they can screw something up in
Well, they had the whole state to work with. Anyway,
Marcy.
Bob, don't make challenges.
So if the optional plan is approved with the recommendation of 3 at-large and 2 districts, it would certainly behoove the council that's just been put into place to create those districts. It also, I don't think, would be too far-reaching for people running for county council to have that be part of their platform, that they've read and understand the optional plan as it's being presented to the voters, and, you know, come out either in favor or against it. And I don't know. I'm looking into the future to try and figure out how to promote this thing, and I want people running in November that are going to push this forward.
Chris?
so, well, that's impossible. So you can't elect the 2 district seats without the districts.
Right.
You have to have the districts first. Otherwise, you can't elect those people out of the districts.
No. Did I make?
No, you didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
So what are you
What
saying?
I'm saying is,
Marcy?
what I'm saying is the optional plan goes to the voters in November. The way it's presented, it recommends two voting districts. So if I'm running for county council in November, and I've read this optional plan, and I support it, that is going to come up when I present myself to the voters.
Oh, you're talking
You're
about
assuming
the current,
The current, you're talking
Form
about
of
current
government.
form of government.
20,
Okay.
Yes.
somebody who goes into
Okay.
office
Yes.
on 2021.
So somebody has to run for office in 2020,
Yeah,
Right,
right?
right.
And
well, they don't have to,
Yeah.
but hopefully they will.
unfortunately, they only get to serve 2 years.
That's right.
But maybe there are people who feel like this is worth going to bat for 2 years.
Well-
You guys,
It's not me.
my comment is there are several ways to do it, and it just needs to be handled in your transition piece of the plan, because right now the way it's drafted is you're electing by these districts, even in the initial seats. So that's something you guys need to figure out your recommendation. But you'll need to tweak some other provisions per this conversation to make that happen.
Mr. Anderson? Mike?
The mic doesn't work.
Yeah, it does.
Does it? Is it working now? Okay. So do you think in the transition plan, the study committee has to set out the process for the existing county council, the timelines, that kind of thing, in order to do that? Or what do you
No,
think that
but-
has to be do you think that has to be in the transition plan?
Well, I had always envisioned it would be this county council, but it doesn't have to be. And so the way that the way it's set up now, you know, is predecessor county council, and then we're electing the few. I don't,
I just want to make sure I understand. Are you thinking that it's the responsibility of the study committee in the transition plan to set out the process for the existing county council to make the districts?
No, that's a violation.
We can't
Yeah.
do
Yeah, we
that.
can't
No.
do it
So
according to
no, but,
the way Christina reads the law.
no, but my point was, you have it set out where, oh, I see what's going on. Okay, so we have a new council in 2020 that's not bound, yeah. No, so maybe it's fine as written. I would need to look at it again.
Can I ask one question? So if we, say for example, we go back to county council, say rural and urban, what happens if they don't draw districts? What happens if they can't agree to districts? And we
Someone-
get to the election and then, because that's one part that, for me, it doesn't seem like, I know HB 224 is not ideal, written very poorly, But what happens in that situation? You just have no,
Courts would get involved. So we'd have deadlines, what, based on 2022 candidacy requirements? And if the council hasn't redrawn districts by those deadlines?
Well, the same thing goes with saying that the council has to call a special election too. And so there's really, you're kind of laying out two scenarios where if the sitting council were adversarial to the change of form of government, they could stop it just by not drafting the districts and not calling the special election.
Walt, and then Marcy, and then Jeremy.
Yeah,
Walt's first.
Another reason we were trying to hurry this is so that we didn't have these multiple elections in short terms. And right now, if I'm right, just to remind, we're gonna have 5 people running in 2020.
4.
Because we got 4 plus Terry is moving out of his district, I thought. So that's 5. He said his house is for sale. Anyway, whether that happens, either 4 or 5, they'll be in office for 2 years.
So it depends on, is this his first year, right? Terry's first
I don't know.
He's first.
So yeah, it would go to the vote.
So so you'd be 5, so 5 of them would have 2-year terms. Then we turn around and have another election, and 3 of them are gonna have 2-year terms, and the 2 district people would have 4-year terms. So you got a bunch of years there where you got 2-year terms at a time, which
We tried to avoid.
we tried to avoid. We can't now.
Marcy, then Jeremy.
Well, I certainly would like to see a way that we can include our districting recommendation
Yep.
as a piece of information to the optional plan. Because I believe that information is very informative to the voters in terms of their decision about possibly accepting or rejecting the optional plan. I mean, it's critical to that.
Jeremy, then Cricket.
So, I mean, we're at the impasse now. This is where we're at. Is we have to have I mean, for me, it's going to require a lot of thought, because it is essentially we change what we had to make it constitutional. Regardless of what they do with HB 224, I know they're going to clean it up. But regardless, that won't affect us, because by the time the governor signs that, we're past our timeline, period. So we're set right now with the idea that we either put forth a recommendation of saying 2 districts, if we can have the urban versus rural language in there, great. If the council's willing to go out on a limb and say we will adopt this is what we like, and that's what we're willing to adopt. We think it's been great work, and that's their prerogative. But as far as what's within our control and our ability to do, it comes with, I think, blind faith at this point that the powers that be moving forward will do what is right and what is consensus, and we'll move forward, and that's our reality. So it's either we do that or we go back to the drawing board and discuss the districting versus the at-large. Because if we want that process and we're willing to give that out to our current county council, then that's what we have to do. We have to go out on a limb and say they're going to do the right thing, they're going to get it done, and they're going to do what's best for the people in that sense.
Cricket, then Bob, then Walt.
Well, Jeremy just made my point that we're hoping that we're selling this to people that we think that, that it's very fair, that we feel like that a rural and city gives you're represented, somebody who cares about maybe your planning and zoning was kind of where our theory was. And so that's what we're selling it on. And then we find out, well, we really have no say. And so then the current or the next county council says, no, we're not gonna do that, then what I'm trying to sell people on, I think I'd maybe rather just have a commission than a council. Because what we hope to see happen could just be flushed.
Bob and Walt?
Well, the distinction between a commission and a council have nothing to do with districting. You can elect commissioners by district as well. So it's a separate issue. I'm not personally in favor of opening up the whole plan. Again, I'm worried about this being a life sentence. I think,
March 8th.
No, you're dying on March 8th.
oh, thank God.
Sunny day.
However, given the fact that we have sitting on this body the chair of the Republican Party and the former chair of the Democratic Party, I'm very confident that we can successfully encourage the council to act favorably on our recommendations. So, I think this is much ado about nothing. I think it's well to remember that districting is a legislative power. And if we have any districts, there's no guarantee that at some time in the future, a county commission or a county council will decide on some other boundaries. No matter what we do, the only way to prevent that would be to go all at large, which I suppose we ought to discuss.
Mr. Anderson wants to make a comment, then we have Walt, Stephen, Marcy.
Sorry to interrupt. I didn't intend to interrupt. There's a couple of legal, conceptual problems with this notion that this whole idea is going into the future likely beyond the lifespan of the study committee. One is, and we discussed this, but there's got to be a way to figure out a set process for the current county council to do their job. There's no timelines in statute, there's no procedures, there's nothing specific as to how they do their job, and you've all discussed the potential for them not even doing their job. So that's a concern for me from a purely legal point of view, is what process is there, and how do you put a process in place? We just wait and see what happens. The second one is, and this is a little more technical issue, and I'm not sure what the answer would be. When you adopt an optional plan of government, when a council can amend that optional plan into the future. If it's a significant amendment, they can't do it on their own. They have to go to the people. But if it's not a significant issue, then they can amend it by council vote, but it has to be a supermajority. Now, my question is, if the creation of the council districts are taken out of being part of the optional plan, does that mean they no longer require a supermajority to vote to do anything with it? If they're not part of the optional plan, and the at-large council seats are part of the optional plan, then you've got to worry about some kind of a double standard as to how they're treated. And one other issue, and it's not necessarily a legal issue, it's this idea of what happens with the 2020 census. It's likely, when the election of the officers was going to be held in 2020, then it would clearly be up to the new county council to reapportion the districts based on the 2020 census. Now, it's likely the census report is not going to come out for at least probably 2 years. So it's still a good possibility the census report will come out before the new council takes office. So that raised the question of which council, the old council or the new council, gets to do reapportionment.
Any comments directly to Mr. Anderson's comments?
Yes, we're advised by our expert on districting that the census data will be released in February and March of 2001. He seemed very confident about that. 21, sorry. Some year with a 1 in it.
Walt,
the
comments on
end.
that?
The only thing is, we would not be taking the 2 districts out of the optional plan, unless I'm missing something. We would have 3 at-large and 2 districts. The only thing we would be taking out of the optional plan is drawing those districts.
The boundaries, yeah.
So it would take the voters to change, and I'm asking this as a question, not as much a statement. It would take the voters to vote again to say, we're gonna get rid of 2 districts and go to all at-large or all districts or whatever it is. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think it's clear that if that big a change was to happen, that would go to the voters.
But also, we would not be taking our proposal of 2 districts and 3 at-large. We wouldn't be taking the district part of that out and putting it in the recommendation plan, just Exhibit A.
Well, you do have my concern is that the court would say, you've taken the 2 district seats out of the optional plan.
How so?
How
Just
so?
the boundaries,
I'm not
Gavin.
following you.
Well, I don't know what a court would do with it, but to me, the issue is, suppose there were somehow a change proposed regarding the council district boundaries by the, either the new council or the old council. My concern is that that's no longer considered a change in the optional plan, because those district boundaries were not part of the optional plan.
I would agree with that, except that you still gotta have 2 districts.
Well,
They can draw them in circles or any configuration
like
they
a
want,
bird.
as long as the county is in 2 pieces, district-wise. That would not change, is what I'm asking.
But my point is that a 2/3 vote or a simple majority vote?
oh, and
to
if I
read.
could weigh in on that, and
Christina?
I don't have that statute in front of me, but I don't think it references district boundaries, it references districts. So I do think if the number is in there, that would require a vote of the voters.
HB 224 says, we establish whether it's at-large or districts or combination. And we're doing that in the plan. What you're saying that we can't do is tell you what those districts specifically are.
Draw the boundaries.
Right.
Draw the boundaries.
That's my concern. It's, bet your nickel and take your chance.
So, my two cents, the things that we've heard so far is that it's possible that they don't draw any districts. It's possible that they do, but maybe they change the intent. We've got people that have said that we've got 2 people from the political parties on here, and again, I despise comments like that, because we've had this opportunity, this question before us before, on how we want to write the districts. And Bob came forward and said, hey, look, how about we make a subcommittee, and we'll have 3 people pick out what the districts look like. It didn't even get a second. I don't think we like that idea. That's my big concern. You're going to have to hope that the people that are in power now are going to save it as an issue, and that they're not going to change it. And then we have to hope that they do what we intend. And we have to hope so many different things, that it's palatable, that it's accepted, etc. I see it as a big concern. With what we're doing now is not what we wanted in the past. Hearing both the attorneys on the issue, my concern is that what we have anticipated, what we spent our time, effort, and money on, isn't necessarily going to be a reality. Although we have promises that in private meetings and backdoors, things like that, that he's talked with the members and they've given him their A-OK, that they promised they'll do it, we have absolutely no control over that. And I think that's why we have to revisit the issue of whether we want districts, or if we want to go at large, or what our options are moving forward. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Marcy?
I hate to say this because I don't like to be the cynic and I don't like to be the skeptic. However, I tend to agree exactly with what Stephen said, is we can hope and we can trust and we can go with blind faith. And I've watched in this county where that backfired in a big way. And I think that we have been very clear about our intent with the districts. And if we cannot assure that that is going to carry into the future, I think we need to look at districting and at-large again.
Bob?
There are lots of things we don't have control over in terms of county government. by law, we don't have control over the boundaries of the districts that we propose in the optional plan. Grant County has an unfortunate history of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, bulldozing the baby's room, and then salting the earth on which it was built. That's how we got to this position in the first place, trying to remove 3 county commissioners by changing the form of government. Let's not go down that road again. We seem to, let's make as small a change as we can to conform with the law and accept the fact that we are not, in fact, all powerful. There were only certain choices we could make in terms of our recommendations. We didn't control that. We don't control the actual boundaries of the districts. I'm not so concerned about that, but it's something that we have no control over. We don't control the precincts.
Cricket?
Well, we all thought we got to control the districts. I mean, you brought a guy in, and that's one of the reasons why we chose the way we did, is because we wanted to make sure that our voters were represented. That's the reason we all agreed to the district. We all had blind faith that we knew what we were allowed. Thank you for catching me before I said something. Said a cuss word. Anyway, we all had blind faith that this is what we're permitted to do. So we're going to hire somebody. We spent money. We spent hours figuring it out, because we even moved little lines where there was no voters, so that people wouldn't think we gerrymandered. I mean, I would stake my life on the fact that we did the best we could, and that nobody could argue it. But we can't now. And I have been very proud of our work up to this point. This scares the hell out of me, that we have no say over that. And that's the reason I was willing to go. And we all know I want it all at large, because I think everybody gets a vote. And I'm not comfortable with districts now.
Point of order.
In response to your comments, Chair, about Bob's comments, there have been 2 public meetings in which we discussed the districts at length, one of which you were there and one of which you were not. I have no idea if there have been other meetings. I don't know of any closed door or inappropriate meetings. There's been somewhat significant discussion on the record about the districts and the fact that the council is impressed with the work that you guys have done. So I want to clear that for the record. Second, why don't you guys meet with the council and get a straw vote from them? Get a sense, because, okay, say that again?
Can we?
Sure.
I mean,
I think you can. I think it's something to think about. And then my third comment is, I do think the districts are crucial to the plan and the election. And so if you choose to go with the 2, I don't see a negative to the current council creating those districts personally. And I think that it would be helpful to the community to see the public process have already started prior to the election. If you guys opt not to do that, and if you are expecting or wanting the 2020 council to do it, I just encourage you to put information in your recommendations report about your recommendation of how that goes down and why. I still think your recommendations report didn't give a lot of why. It wasn't something that I could find a violation for. But for example, our current expanding commission isn't working. Well, why? You didn't tell us why. And why is this going to be better? You don't tell us why. So I do think you can improve the recommendations report a little bit on that stuff.
well, number one, it's not an expanded commission, and by default, we're a council, but with the powers of an expanded commission, which is why we're in this situation, because our own current form of government is out of whack with the state statute. But I understand where you're coming from with the whys, but the reality of it is if it doesn't violate constitutional law, there doesn't need to be a why as from this study.
Well, there is information in the piece of statute that says what should be in the recommendations report that asks for a why.
So, and are those adequately answered?
It's gray, in my opinion. I was going to punt based on a recommendations report, but I do think it's lacking.
Cricket?
Well, and the point is about going before the county council and asking them to please, give us a straw vote. It probably won't even be the same council that's going to choose the district. So I think that's kind of a waste or a moot point because it won't be the same council.
Well, it could be.
They could do it in October 20th or whatever, and that following Tuesday after the election cycle.
But then,
But
still could get changed again before the next.
there's caveats there. And I think one of the reasons I laugh that we're talking about like changing districts when our county districts have been so out of whack in violation of the 1 versus 1 for how long, and nobody was motivated to change it. So, we're getting into that area where I personally agree with Stephen, with Marcy, that I lean right now towards the thought that, okay, it's a Hail Mary. I'd rather this thing be clean, button up, ready to go. Christina signs off on it. It's black and white. There it is. And this is what we're going to get. This is what's going to the voters. And there's no gray area for the politicking anymore and any of the grandstanding or any of that. This is what we're going to have. Do you like it? Yes or no? There's no question as to, the council's going to do this or they're going to do that. I mean, that's my personal prerogative on it, is I'd rather have it buttoned up, because at the end of the day, yeah, I can go and I can lobby certain individuals on the council. Bob can go and lobby individuals on the council, and we can put pressure and we can play this, but there's no guarantees there at all. And what I love about what we've been able to do is we've been able to take very dynamic personalities and different backgrounds from our community and find consensus and work through it. I don't know that we get that with our current council. I don't know that we get that with the next council. I don't know that we do. I think one of the reasons we've been able to do that is because we're not playing that politic game. We're not elected representatives playing this game, I would love for somebody to run for the GOP chairman seat. I just got saddled with it again. But the reality of it is, this to me shouldn't be about the politics behind it or any of that. We did that. That's done. That's done and over. We're at that point. So anything going forward, for my personal taste, and I think for a lot of the voters at this point, is they want to know what they're going to get. And if we go down the road where they don't know what they're going to get, that's going to eventually fall on us and put egg on our face. I want it to be buttoned up. I love that Mr. Anderson is communicating with Christine, and we're moving forward. And we're going to find out, what is this option? What if we do this? Because this is where we're at. We're at the point now where we got to say, okay, we need to have a plan. It needs to be clear. It needs to be concise. And if it's not, our voters are going to feel disenfranchised with the whole system again. Because they have been. Up until this moment, this is one of the things that I have found when I go out into the public. What they're happy with us is our ability to find consensus and compromise. And our ability to be clear and to leave everything else on the table. If we go back to where we're unsure what you're going to get, but here's our recommendation, the waters get muddy again. And that's just where we're at.
Walt, then Chris, both fresh voices.
Yeah, whatever happens, one legislative body cannot tie the hands of a future legislative body. So that's a fact, in whether it's the Congress or this group here. So we can't pour in concrete anything that guarantees the future. I will tell you that, having been at all 4 of those houses and looked at the surveys, what we chose was the most popular, significantly the most popular form, the combination of at-large and districts. That hasn't changed. And when people were talking, they did not have a particular idea of what those districts would be. They assumed, because we told them, Judy, that we would guarantee that they would be based on population, equally drawn and consistent with the law of one person, one vote. But nobody at that time was talking about a rural versus urban situation. They just assumed we would we would have districts. And a lot of them thought we would have 3 districts and 2 at-large. So we've got 2 districts and 3 at-large now. Again, we can't tie a future group. The other thing I will say is anybody that's talked to me has said, how did you guys think of 2 districts with an urban and an at-large? That is absolutely novel. We like it. I haven't talked to any of the county council people that exist now. Some of you apparently have, who do like it as well as a recommendation. I will say that when we had the cooperator up here, our consultant, Mr. Cooper, on the phone, we went through, because we hadn't thought of this urban versus thing, and the most logical and the thing that jumped out at all of us is, whoa, that really does capture it. In the case of Jeremy and Cricket, who were certainly for at-large, that made sense to them because it really meets the, it's completely defendable. And so I think if we put it in the plan as 3 and 2 and put our recommendations that it be the urban and rural, it's going to be real hard. Too many people know about this urban and rural and like the feel of it right now, in my opinion. Having said that, we cannot bind a future legislative body to anything. They can redistrict anytime they want,
Chris,
regardless of who's controlling that legislature.
Chris, then Bob.
So I guess this is a question for you, Christina. So in kind of just researching Gavin's question about whether or not redistricting would be a 2/3 majority or a simple majority. And this is specifically in relation to amendments of the optional plan. And it says, this is number 2, notwithstanding subsection 1, an amendment to an optional plan that is in effect may not take effect until a majority of registered voters voting in a general or special election at which the amendment is proposed approve the amendment if the amendment changes the size or makeup of the legislative body except for adjustments necessary due to decennial reapportionment. What would decennial reapportionment have to do with an optional plan if an optional plan didn't contain districts?
I'll need to look at that after this.
No, but I'm saying if, I guess that's my point. Like, why would the legislature write that if they didn't intend the optional plan to contain districts?
They do intend for it to include districts, but not particular boundaries.
Well, you're saying it's not a part of the optional plan, though.
You can specify whether there are districts or not. You
No,
can
but reapportionment, decennial reapportionment has to
I'll
do
need to
with
look
the
at it.
district.
I'm not going to debate the legality of it right now. I don't have it in front of me. I need to look at it. I definitely looked at that statute. Did. I'll look at it again.
And I guess my second question is, are the geographic boundaries of the district a necessary implementing provision of this optional plan?
No.
They're not.
I
So
don't
how
think
does this
so.
optional plan work without them?
What? How would it not work without them? What do you mean?
So if you had 2 districts, but you didn't, if you had 2 seats that are running in districts,
Right.
but you didn't have the districts, how does this optional plan work?
You create the districts via the separate process. That's the separate legislative process. They're created, and then these seats are bound by those districts.
So I guess what I'm getting at is the HB 224 clearly says that this study committee can propose in their optional plan all necessary implementing provisions. So I'm asking you, is this a
Right.
necessary implementing provision? Are districts, the geographic boundaries, a necessary implementing provision of this optional plan?
No, I already found that they are not.
I don't understand the logic of that.
Well,
How
I'll look
can-
at that one statute again, but otherwise, look at my 6 pages of my written memo, and we can read about it later.
All right. I guess, to that end, the only way that this body can create an optional plan that the voters are certain of what they're voting on is if you eliminate districts altogether and you go all at large. Because if you don't, then as Cricket indicated, they don't know what they're going to end up getting.
We've got Bob, myself, and then Jeremy.
Well, first, point of order. As I understand it, Steve, Mr. Chairman, your intent is to schedule additional meetings where this committee will look at each issue and make a decision on compliance.
Not necessarily compliance,
Well-
changes or compliance.
Yeah, changes of compliance. So the discussion that we're having now, while it's interesting, is kind of out of order.
How
And
so?
Because of your intent to examine this issue in a separate meeting.
Not necessarily.
I asked that the agenda be changed to allow us to make a decision. And you told me that, no, I don't want to do that because I think we should take each issue separately at a future meeting. If no decision is possible here, and the agenda item is to really to understand the county attorney's findings and the possibilities for us coming into compliance, I think we're going way beyond that. We could be here till the crows come home, but if we're going to schedule a whole meeting for this issue, I think that's the right time to discuss it. I do have a question for you.
One moment, your point of order, if I can respond. I don't think, we're still in discussion. We're going through the issues. We've got County Attorney Sloan here to ask questions, answer questions. We're on number 4 of her report. We're going through the rest of it. Regarding scheduling, that's not necessarily what this is about. We're going through and having discussion like we've had on everything else. So I'm not cutting people off. I'm giving everybody the opportunity to go through.
I understand.
Regarding your point about wanting to set this out, I had complaints that we were going too fast, and I think it was your comment in the county council meeting that you said we've gone too fast in this process. And a couple times you've said we've gone too fast, we need to slow down. And so I'm giving everybody the opportunity to stop, to breathe, to go through this carefully, because I don't want us to make mistakes, because that was one of the reasons why you stated that we made mistakes was because we went too fast. So
Thank you.
with that in mind, I think we go through this. I think we're getting close. I've got you and then Jeremy, and then we can move on to just general comments, and then we can, if Ms. Sloan would like to stay for the rest of it, welcome to, but we just want to have everybody have the opportunity to answer and ask any questions that they have, and that's
Thank
why
you.
we're here, and that's why we've had Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So
Bob,
my
thank you,
question
Mr.
for
Chairman.
you is, can you tell us with some certainty right now whether or not a change in district boundaries is a change that would require a future council to go to the voters?
No, I'd like to look at that statute again and then
Okay.
report back.
Great, thank you.
Jeremy, then Marcy.
So I mean, I understand. I see. I really do. I understand where Christine is coming from. The HB 224 was written poorly. It really was. They should have put in their express permissions. But I also understand where Chris is coming from. You know, we have the county attorney who's looking at the letter of the law, and we have, you know, the county clerk who is also our election judge for this area going, hey, well, you're putting the cart before the horse. And that's where we're at in this situation. And unfortunately, once again, I think the state legislature plans on cleaning it up. I know they plan on cleaning it up with private conversations that I've had with elected legislators, you know, and what their intent was. But it doesn't matter, as Christine has pointed out. And the reality of it is none of us are empowered as a body to take it to court and have it cleaned up that way. So we're going to have to rely on the state legislatures to clean it up. They're aware of it. How fast they clean it up, who knows?
And
That's
whether they address this
whether
issue.
they address this issue particularly. I think they are going to address what the powers of the body are, because this has opened that up, and we're not the first county to bring that up to them. They're aware of it. I mean, so in the past it's been, you know, other attorneys have said it's implied. We get this. We understand it. And Christine is going more letter of the law, which is her prerogative and her right to do. I get that. I think the frustration with the community is they want it to move forward, they want to get it done, they want it stamped, and they want to go and they want to be able to vote on that. With that being said, this is where we're at. Nothing new has been presented to us. If we go with districts and we decide that we're going to go with our plan, we can put in there, and I hope Christina gets back to us on our recommendation to have one urban and one rural. But if that is in of itself, again, a dictating
or expressing to the council what they are to do, it could violate law. So that's something that may not happen also. The reality of it is, it could be changed at any time by any council in the future. They don't do it very often. And the reason they don't do it is because it ticks off the voters. That's reality. You start muddying the waters and you start changing districts pretty regularly, your voters aren't going to be happy and you're not going to get elected. But in this situation, we're in a whole new world and a whole new ball game. I wish the legislature could fix it a lot quicker and could expedite this to give us answers and those types of things, but they don't. And there's no law that's written that's perfect, and a lot of laws go before judges, and they get cleaned up, and that's part of the process. We just don't have time for that process, because once that clock started ticking, here we are. This is what we have. If March 8th we can't come up with an alternative plan, then the worst case scenario happens for this entire county. And that is we default to 3-member commission at large, which
Nobody wanted.
as I'll say, there's only a handful that want it, and I'm not one of them. And I've made that real clear. So this is our reality. This is where we're at. I think we digest it. I think we go through it. We discuss it. I think when that time comes, it would be great to have Christina and Gavin and all of us involved in that process when we go through and the next time we present it to Christina, because some of it was easily and is easily corrected. Some of it is a little bit larger. Whether we agree, disagree, to me it's mute at this point. I disagree with Christine. I agree more with Chris in this sense. Doesn't matter. This is the reality we're at. There's no override here. This is the confines in which we as a body have to work, and we have to decide on what we're willing to give up to faith and hope and the rest of what we can control, and what is our duty to the community. So we just go from there.
Okay. We've got a couple people in line. If we could focus questions for Ms. Sloan, I know
Right.
that would be probably the best use of her time and our
That'd be great.
time. So we've got Marcy and Walt.
Okay. So I would like, before we meet again, I would like Christina and Chris, or maybe it's just Christina, I would like them to figure out if there is a way to resolve or come to some agreement on the point of law that they disagree about. And if the reality is there someone that they can approach, short of going before a judge, to determine that your different interpretations? Is there someone that can inform either one of you more in a detailed manner or whatever, so that you can come back to us with, this is where we stand on this? Because in my opinion, if Christina does not agree with the clerk, and if it's very difficult for us to decide how to move forward on this districting issue without knowing exactly where she stands. Because if she is unwilling to change her opinion, if her opinion of the law is this, that is going to, for me personally, that is going to determine how I move forward on this districting versus at-large question.
If I may, a point of clarification. Christina's review supersedes. It is, her review of this is, and I don't want to...
She has the power.
Correct. And I don't want the illusion to be that, it's a face-off between you
No,
folks.
I'm not considering it a face-off.
We love each other, guys, don't worry about it.
I know, what I'm
We've been
saying
arguing
is...
for
We,
years.
this is all we do.
If
This is-
anybody knows Chris and Christine.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the reality
It's the
is that
basis
the
of our
county
relationship.
attorney holds the final say.
Correct. So there's probably not a third, what I'm saying is there's probably not a third person
Well-
that they would go to. It's Christina's ultimate decision.
Well,
I
yeah,
also would like to make the point, I didn't do this in a bubble. I don't want the power, guys. I consulted with these guys, of course. I also reached out to 2 other attorneys. One is a constitutional law expert who did work on the Navajo Nation case, The other one is the Park City Deputy Civil County Attorney, Summit County Deputy Civil County Attorney. One of whom agreed with me, said it was extraordinary work, and the other guy said, I'm not so convinced, and I know the other counties have done it this way. So, know that it is law, and law is interesting in its grayness. So I don't think there's going to be one all-powerful being that will convince us. But Chris and I will work through this one additional statute as well, together, and
Well, I mean,
at
I'm,
least report
How
back.
many times have you agreed with a judge? I mean, that's just reality.
Yeah.
well, I mean, I made it clear that I don't agree with that, but I'm still going to do whatever it takes to move forward
Right.
under that particular finding. I mean, it does present some issues for me, some of it, because HB 224 is saying that if Christina makes a favorable finding that I shall put it, the county clerk, shall put it on the ballot. And then there's another opinion, another bit of code that says that it has to be the legislative body that calls a special election. And so I'm being told to do two different things. And so it puts me in a tough position because which bit of code am I supposed to be following?
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Bear.
And so I'll just say that in a lot of these instances, I have referred these questions to the Lieutenant Governor's office, and so if I, get some backing from them about how to proceed, then I'll probably take that advice. But there are conflicts in code and statute about what I'm supposed to do. And I would have to decide which bit of code am I going to follow because they are contradictory to each other.
Mr. Anderson, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
If, at this point, regardless of what happens, we have to resubmit the plan, we have to go through the steps, change it, resubmit it, regardless of whatever, if the decision is changed that the districts were intentional or to write into the actual description of the districts, regardless, we do have to resubmit it.
For county attorney review.
Correct.
again.
120 days prior to March 8th, when we,
No.
No, but prior to the election.
Well, we're
We
done
can
March
Well,
submit
8th.
now your one-year date's gonna control,
Yeah,
We
we're
can
done.
submit it March 8th, though.
Right.
It still leaves,
we just said,
right,
but it has to be perfect.
has to be perfect.
Well,
I would recommend it.
Yeah, the only thing I think we absolutely have to know, or another thing from you, is we can put the two districts in the optional plan. It does not have to be in the recommendation. Secondly, the voters, as Jeremy accurately pointed out, have had the districts for a long time and nothing's been changed since '92, basically, on the districts. They clearly said they wanted the mix of districts and at large, and I guarantee you, none of them almost know. I didn't know till we started working on this that the districts were totally skewed. Most voters are completely unaware that they were illegal districts, or they probably would have gotten interested in changing them because they're not fair and they're not legal. So, before we throw this out, we're going to have this discussion. I really want to know that if we make the decision that it's 3 and 2, that does not have to be changed. And the only thing that would be different is that the other part is a recommendation. And there's just so many ways to divide this county up in 2 that don't make much sense.
But there are legal constraints in that redistricting on the council, so they can't be uneven.
No.
And I agree with Walt that everyone that I've ever heard from loves this idea. But even if for some reason your council had some power play, there's still legal constraints on them. And even though people aren't challenging these old illegal districts, it's a whole different process when you're going through a process. People are going to be watching and it's going to be illegal. So the districts are going to be even and legal, however they turn out.
There's some of us that would challenge them now, knowing how skewed they were. I did not know that.
I've known forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, we really have. I mean, I think
All
both
right,
sides have thought about it. We just looked
other questions for Christina? Or other questions on the review of the plan overall?
I actually have a related but off-topic question, comment. Maybe I'm speaking as a citizen, I don't know. obviously this House Bill 224 changed the law. It requires us already, to be partisan once the new plan goes into effect, no term limits, et cetera. In some ways, it seems like all this work that's being done is like just trivial compared to what must have been really wanted, which is to be partisan and to have this no recall and to, have no term limits. And so it's almost like none of this other stuff matters in one respect. So I'm wondering, we were grandfathered forever, and then all of a sudden we weren't. So when, maybe the attorneys know, when did our grandfathering status get lost and how?
I can answer that.
It was HB 224. Mike's correct. There was a grandfathering statute that said the Grand and Morgan plans are okay. And then that was changed in 2018 with HB 224, which said no nonpartisan, no recall, no term limits.
Well, I mean, just as a point of clarification, and maybe it's just semantics, but Grand County's form of government has never been out of compliance, ever. And so up until HB 224, there was a specific grandfathering clause, and we were never out of compliance because of that. And HB 224 gives us a period of time to change the form of government. And until we pass that deadline, we're still in compliance. We have never operated illegally, and we have never been an illegal form of government, ever. And so I keep hearing that said, but it's not true. It is not true.
What's funny, Ruth, to answer your question in a more practical, like the way the legislator looked at it, we got bigger and we got more attention. And the bigger we become and the more attention Grand County gets, the more they pay attention to us. And I think in the past it was just kind of like, let them do their thing down there in eastern Utah. But as our community has grown, as we've become more recognized, and as we continue to grow, they're going to pay attention, which oftentimes for us down here, we always feel like meddling, and I get that. But the reality of it is we continue to be this driving force for people to come to Utah from outside of Utah. They're going to continue to pay attention to us. So I think that's where it all started to change.
Marcy? Questions for Christina? Let's try to focus on that.
Could this study committee write a whole new optional plan and submit it to you?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's what we're...
Yeah, the old one's a dead letter at this point.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
You mean change everything?
Yeah, you could, theoretically.
Oh, yeah.
One more point on that is, you guys aren't required to have a public hearing now that you've created the plan. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think necessarily y'all have the appetite for that, but
We already have a plan for it.
for a
Not
public
a
hearing.
public hearing, but an open
No,
house, right?
open house.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Same diff in my
Rather
opinion.
than opposite.
That was it.
We've had several open houses that were not open houses.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I tried to make that point prior, that you didn't
Public
have time for a
process, then.
public hearing before, but
Public process.
prior, you do now. I mean, prior to actually deciding again on the next iteration, you could hold a public hearing.
So are you referring to public
Or-
hearing per se or public process?
No, public process. So
Okay.
I think either one is great. I think, I do think the public wants to be involved, and I think it's a great thing to do, to just have some sort of public meeting. These are public meetings, but where you're really seeking people out.
Well, we thank you for your time
Thank
to
you.
come down and the work that you've done on this. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
All right, any other discussion on general reports, item B? If not, we'll move to community outreach and possible action. Seeing none, we'll move to citizens to be heard. Now is the time to speak. Public, no one. Moving on to presentations, there are none.
Lost the press.
General business, action items, discussion and consideration of coordinating specific optional plan agenda topics with specific regular meeting dates. All right, here are my thoughts. There's no need for 9-hour marathon meetings. I think that we can limit these meetings to 1 hour, be concise, focus on a topic, get in, get out, get on with life. I know none of us want to be here. I know none of us want to rehash everything. So my suggestion is we have a day, we pick a day, we talk about one thing, we get it wrapped up, cleared up, cleaned up, suggest language to Mr. Anderson, approve whatever recommendations there are, and close the book on that. Go to the next, go to the next, go to the next, and be done with it. I don't see the point in losing our minds. So we've got, I don't know if everybody has their calendars.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Quickly?
Yes.
I'm willing to go with that. However, I would like to suggest that March 8th will come up very quickly. November and December are very hectic, difficult months for everybody. If we need information from Ms. Sloan regarding further interpretation of the law, I don't want to get behind the 8 ball and be here in January and February and not have the information we need to make a good decision.
That's why I
Just
want
my
us to
thought.
open our calendars up. We have a few different dates already selected out by Ruth, right, that we've already scheduled.
You all did, yes.
And I want to go through them, look at them, make sure it still works for,
Chair,
yes.
before you do that, how many items are we talking about? We're not talking about having a meeting to take that date out of the thing.
Well, I'd like to
Or-
open up for whatever people have a palette to discuss. If there's an area that people want to discuss and there's at least a couple people, 2 people to discuss it, we can go back through and discuss some things. I don't anticipate us reopening the entire plan, but there are some bigger topics that we have to talk about. So one for my mind is, I think revisiting salary might be something that would be important because we made, and I was the one that had motioned for it, made a quick shot. I think there's more time now that we have more information and more time. I'd like to look at salaries again, now that we're not under a time constraint. If there's anyone that would agree or disagree with that, if I don't have anyone else besides myself that support that idea, I'll drop it and we'll go forward and keep the plan as is. But that's how I kind of anticipated if there's anything, because we've got the plan before us and there might be things that we didn't have time to look at and we just went through it. Mr. Anderson?
There's another issue with the change in election dates. You recall that we set the election dates for members of the council based on gubernatorial and presidential years. That will change with the initial election of officers in 2022. So that's something we need to revisit.
Right. Yes.
It seems to me that you've begun to describe a process for opening up different parts of the plan.
If necessary, if people would like.
I would like to see it kind of formalized so we all understand that what's going to get something back on the table.
Sure.
And it seems to me that kind of ordinary procedure would require a motion and a vote to bring something back, other than the
Well, we have to redo the plan
other than the
altogether.
4 issues that the county attorney has identified as being out of compliance. District, those 4.
Well, the
issues.
plan that we have, like you just mentioned a moment ago, is it's dead. So we're going to have to redraft the entire plan, or do we just add an addendum that says we're changing these areas?
Well, I proposed, and it's just my own fevered imagination, that we issue an amended report and recommendation. That's not necessarily the only way to go or the best way to go. You may want to completely start over from scratch.
Why would we want to connect the two? Why wouldn't we just start with a clean version as opposed to?
I think that's a decision the committee can make, yeah.
I think just it would be probably cleaner, because then we'd have to reference to certain parts of it but not other parts.
Right.
Thoughts on that?
That's fine.
I'm not
Agree.
sure what you're
Instead
saying.
of adding an addendum that just strikes this and this and this, he's saying that we.
Yeah, we
start over.
revise it.
I mean, we revise it, and
Right.
that essentially is creating
Repla-
it all over
replace
again.
it. You
Yeah,
replace it.
replace and revise,
Exactly.
so.
I think there'd just be some kind of procedural landmark that says the optional plan we issued in September has been repealed, rejected. It's not the committee's direction anymore.
So
I don't know
we-
what that would be.
Okay, so we need to make,
Just
not, we couldn't make it today, we'd have to make it in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Could we add that on our next meeting's agenda to
Discuss
do a
how to do
vote?
it. It may be simple enough to just do a vote and a letter and something like that.
A vote, yeah.
So,
So, I think we can,
because I know, for example, Marcy had wanted to go through and add more information about advertising in 2022, or setting up that.
well, that's kind of
Right.
in the future. But, so for example, I think the four items that Christie has an issue with, I think three we can address and approve in one meeting without,
Under an hour,
without
hour
an
and a
issue,
less.
okay?
What's our next meeting
Then-
date?
the 4th.
Beyond that,
I have been assigned a case out of San Juan County recently. I will be absent on the 4th. I have to go to mediation.
I'm on the way to South America.
We
You're
have,
gone
right
for
now,
5
we have the
weeks.
4th, the 18th, and the 25th of October.
18?
Do we want to cancel our Friday the 4th meeting? 'Cause we've got 5 out of 7.
well, you're not here on the 18th either, are you?
I'm returning on the 18th.
Ah.
18th works for me. 11th works. Every Friday works for me besides that. So do we want to schedule it for the 18th of
Well, it
October?
won't be here.
The 25th?
We've got
We'll go to the
6.
25th.
If we can try to at least get 6 people out of 7 to move forward.
Maybe choose your topic first?
The 3 items that Christine wanted to
Oh,
correct
you
without
did
the
say
Yeah, so
district.
that'd be,
do that. Those
do
are
that
so
one.
straightforward. I
And
mean,
then the 25th is another day.
And then the 25th is our next meeting. And,
The 25th could be
and
the districts.
I would really like to have.
that, he won't be here, so let's,
no, I'm here the 25th.
oh, are you? Okay.
I'd like to have information from Christina regarding those points of law.
I'm sure we'll have those before we come, I would hope.
So we've got the 18th, the 3 items to correct, and then the 25th would be the districts.
That sounds good.
The 25th is the district.
Yes.
So nothing on the 4th?
No, we're
I
going to
don't-
cancel that.
Cancel that one.
So move.
You got a motion to cancel our Friday, October 4th meeting. Got a second.
And to schedule
And to schedule
The 18th.
the 18th and the
To-
25th.
the 18th to consider the county attorney's findings B, C, and D, and the 25th to consider the county attorney's finding A.
For resolving districts.
Second.
We got a second on that. Any questions? Any discussion on that? All in favor of putting those on?
Unanimous.
Unanimous. 7-0.
Chairman,
Yes, well,
in your mind, as it relates to the plan, and Marcy's question maybe of rewriting the plan, is your thought that we're going to go back through this line by line and try to do this again, or are you going to just entertain different members who might have an issue they want to revisit?
any issues that I don't think we need to go line by
I
line
don't
through it.
either.
But I think if there's an issue that people feel, now that some things might change, that they want to discuss, we can put it on as an action item, discuss if we want to change that language, because then the optional plan is open if people say, hey, I dislike this or I dislike this, because we're going back and we're piecemealing certain parts of the plan that somebody else has told us that we have to do. So I want people to have the opportunity to go through and say, you know what, I'm looking at it again, it's almost like when you do a project and you leave it for a week and you come back and look at it and say, these things I change. I think that would be a clean way to do it instead of just forcing us, back into agreement into the document. If I'm out of place or wrong, or if people don't like that mindset, then
Well, I think that given the fact that we have to consider what I consider a kind of a major revision in that, we have these districts and we thought we were real proud of the way we set them up, and I agree that the voters wanted a combination of district and at large. We can't determine how the district's made. You want to go clear back in time, let's go back to the fact that the voters 2 times have said they're happy with the existing government. I mean, maybe that's something we want to consider again, if we can't set this up the way that I'm just like totally out in the netherworld, but I have a lot to think about.
That's an interesting tweak, Marcy, on HB 224. It clearly says the study committee can recommend no change in county government, which would be your jurisdiction, or your wherewithal. But it also says, however, Grand County and Morgan County have to change their form of government.
Right, but if we said, okay, we're not gonna have term limits, we're gonna do partisan politics,
Yeah.
and we're not gonna do such and such, and we wanna keep our seven-man,
Person.
you know,
We
do
could
we
be
have to
done.
identify it as a council and keep our inefficient form of executive department? I mean,
Well, it does.
it's ridiculous, because we were trying to improve the government, you know, we were really had our heart, we really had our intellect and our hearts in this concept of, our mission is not just to throw out the old form, it's to make Grand County better, and I think we can still do that, I'm just
Marcy,
on a tangent.
when you say "we," I've been saying since the start,
I'm just
exactly
saying,
what you're saying
now I
now.
have pause.
You
to
may
go,
agree with me. Maybe he was right.
No.
Not maybe you were right, but maybe this is consideration.
Give me the garbage can.
I feel like
You've been saying what, Bob?
we have.
I've been saying that we should make as few changes to the current form of government as will legally be allowed. Because
Yeah, let's,
Yes, can we do the
November
November dates?
dates.
Sorry,
Marcy's tangent.
just telling you, I'm going off the.
So,
deep
so
end.
I'm guessing that what I've said is go back and look at different pieces. At least I have one person that agrees that there are some things to
No, I
revisit.
absolutely agree too. I think if we have it, we just bring it in a structured way, put it on the
Right.
agenda, bring it up on the agenda, and then
Right.
if we get a second,
Well, and
Discuss it.
we have a few weeks too where we might, as next meeting, we might say, okay, well, I've looked at it and I'd like to. So it's a living document at this moment. We're
I'll
kind
tell
of,
you, I've read through it, and I think some of the stuff that you guys did was genius.
Oh yeah, you weren't even here.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Sorry.
I gotta read it from an outside person
know.
looking in.
Hey, you signed
We're
it.
geniuses.
All right.
But it was,
Focusing.
there was
November-
some stuff that is just
November
like pure
1st.
genius.
November 1st.
Can we vote on that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Okay, November 1st. Who is not here? Okay, November 1st. Okay, how about November 8th?
I'm in Mozambique
Okay,
for the rest of November.
the rest of November. Is there any other conflicting dates in November that people have? So we've got 6 here.
Just the 20, obviously the
Thanksgiving.
Do we want to do the 8th as the last day in November and then move to December?
People are absent. Can you attend by
Telephonically?
8th,
15th work pretty nice.
15th works for me.
15 works for me.
I'm here too, I'm here all month.
I'm the only one
I can do it.
apparently who can't be
we
here.
could do 8th and 15th.
We'll set tentatively 8th and 15th.
Is that-
Study committee meeting dates.
Speaking
What's
off
the
the
15th
cusp,
of-
I think we should
Um,
have a goal to have it done by December, so we have ample time to deal with anything before March 8th.
I agree.
I would put salary on for the 8th as one of the topics. Any other topics that people know of right now? I know this is, I'm kind of sprung it on you. Mr. Anderson?
I'm concerned about some of the things Christina said about the report and recommendation document.
Okay.
What kinds of things we need to put in there that
Okay.
we didn't think about before.
So the 8th, we've got salary and report recommendation, and then the 15th, anybody, we'll just have.
I will be gone the first week in December.
Maybe the
too.
15th, we'll
Me too.
have, I don't know, we're starting with a home group, we'll have a draft of our updated plan.
No, we don't have to draft anything until we get through this process.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get us through the process.
Do we want, so we're shooting for a rough draft on Friday the 15th of November? We're still in November.
I
I was looking at this.
was going to say Friday the 13th of December. Woohoo.
Yeah,
I
yeah, good idea.
hilarious.
Good idea.
So any other dates? Because I've got one in November now as the 8th. Anything else?
8th and 15th.
15th.
I'm sorry, 8th and 15th. Okay. And we'll put the 15th as the date for the rough draft.
Yeah, I will miss both November meetings then.
Mozambique.
Yeah, I can, I've done that before.
Okay.
Wow.
Is that your plan?
Yeah, I'll
Is
go
that
Skype,
enough dates out for us?
see what time
That's
it
three
is in
more.
Mozambique right now.
4 more. How do you get 4? Oh, those two.
Yeah, it's only 9:45,
Rough draft.
In the morning?
Or if there's
Tonight?
other things that people want to add.
so it starts at 8.
Well, we'll know that as we go through.
Well,
So,
Right.
are you talking about canceling November 1st?
November, oh, yeah, we're gonna have to cancel November 1st.
Yes.
Yeah, we already did, didn't we?
So we need somebody to motion
I
to
motion.
cancel November 1st and then set days on the 18th and the 15th, or the 8th
I'll
and the
second
15th.
that.
Yep.
so
I
we're canceling the
motion, she seconded.
22nd and 20,
Yes, we're replacing the November dates with 2 meetings, October 8th and October 15th, and
No, November.
November.
November
Sorry,
8th, November 15th. November 8th and November 15th.
no other dates in November. Cancel.
Oh, got that, okay. And so the motion is to cancel November 1st and for November 8th to discuss salary and also the report and recommendations
Right.
document.
Yep.
And then November 15th,
Rough draft.
Rough draft.
Possible
possible
rough draft.
Other issues.
Okay,
and others.
and others.
Okay,
Any
so
dis-
who seconded? Sorry.
Cricket made the motion and Marcy seconded.
Okay, got it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yes? No?
opposed.
Okay.
One.
6-1.
Did you vote one?
Yes, he
I
did.
did.
Okay.
Okay, 6-1 passes with Mr. Greenberg.
Voting is yes to having a meeting?
On those dates, because both dates I cannot
Oh,
attend.
You said you could attend via phone.
Well, we'll see.
I'm gonna try.
I'll
So-
try to. It's a Skype
He'll be
situation.
playing with
which
I-
is-
grandkids, he won't be carrying, it's okay. It's
I-
okay.
Yes.
Think we should add the 13th.
Of
December.
Just because it's
Eh.
December the 13th?
Yeah, well, it's a,
I'll second
if
that.
we need to, it's a
I'll
fallback
second
or,
that.
you know,
Okay,
just let's go
Scheduling.
ahead and schedule that, and then if we don't need it, we can cancel it.
December 13th.
And that's a brand new meeting.
Just a brand new
Ju-
placement meeting.
Just a placement, yeah.
Okay.
You want to vote
Hopefully
on
by
that
then we
then?
can
Because
get
that's not on your
Christina some
schedule.
reading
There's a
material
process
for
I
her
have to
Christmas
do.
break.
There's a process I have to do to alert the public about you've created a new date. So if that's the only new date you're going to create, it would be nice to know. I know you don't know yet. But anyway, so you're saying, I need a motion then about adding December 13th.
Yeah,
I-
she made a
it was
motion.
made and I seconded.
Bob seconded.
Okay.
So December 13th meeting, all in favor of the December 13th meeting at noon? 7-0 passes unanimously. All right. Any other discussion about item C? Coordinating specific optional plan agenda topics with specific regular meeting dates. Item D, setting up a deadline for submitting the amended optional plan. We're back again. We need to figure out when is our absolute drop dead date, or set a drop dead date to have this thing back to Christina.
December 13th.
We just want to set December 13th as the date to do that.
So can I just, I would just make a recommendation that, and December 13th would work, but that you get it to her at least maybe like 50 days before March 8th or whenever you're,
Yeah.
have
Or
to have
more
it
than
done,
that.
so that she can do her 45-day review, and if she finds something else, you still have a week or whatever to come back and say,
Can I ask you a question? Can we know, and Mr. Anderson, you would have this as well, could we know her other critiques of the plan? Because if she had, and I don't want to, I don't want to say that this would be something that would happen, but she said to you folks that there were 8 or 19 or however many other complaints that she had. I would hate for us to go through this process again, and then her to say, well, I'm starting to get a stomachache about, 17 and 16 that we never even saw. So would it be possible to see those?
well, I would request those of her. I can't answer that, but she
Right.
can.
Right, I'm just speaking out loud. I don't think that's a bad
It's
idea.
unreasonable, because when she said gray areas, I mean, I want to know what those are. I want
And
to.
today, she stated very clearly she didn't think the recommendations was fleshed out
Yeah,
enough.
but that's not a deal breaker.
Well, we don't know that.
Yes, we do. We have her report.
Huh?
We have her 4 findings.
It
But
doesn't
we
matter.
won't.
With the same document.
That doesn't matter. She could, and
What's
Mr.
the new
Anderson can
document?
correct me, if she says yes today, and then we submit, imagine we submitted the same exact plan. We changed the 4 things. Could she come back and say, these other things don't muster.
Well,
Of course.
yeah,
So,
so, I mean, I would ask her, one thing that she dropped that I would actually recommend you include because it's required is, I think it's a suggested budget appropriation or something like that for the cost of the government. And even though, you've set forth the salaries of the council members, you didn't establish any kind of number for the county manager. And I would say that's
based on experience.
well, I would just say that that's kind of lacking in terms of what the law requires for you to establish a budget appropriation. And I don't think it has to be specific. Maybe it's a range, but you didn't do that. And so I was a little surprised that she dropped that one.
Mr. Anderson, then Judy?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If there's a list of stuff that you recommend that needs to be, you want us to visit like that, we need to have that.
I'll take a look. But I would definitely request from Christina any gray areas that can be improved.
What else she was uncomfortable with that she didn't maybe write up?
She shared those eight
Can we
points
add-
with us, kind of confidentially, so I'm wondering if Chris could talk to her and say, is it okay if we release those other 4 points to the committee?
Or just have, just,
Mr.
you could just request
Mr.
it,
Anderson,
Steve.
You request it, since you've been in communication with her,
Sure.
and just request it. If she's uncomfortable with it,
If we need to.
we'll request if we need to. Could we set one more date then? Because I think that's going to be a substantial piece.
put you in a bad position?
Well, he's communicating with her as our attorney.
These are all Fridays, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's no problem. I do have to ask, just kind of the sense of the committee, how closely do you want me to work with Christina? I'm concerned that she's kind of in the driver's seat now, and I'm a backseat passenger.
I don't,
I really have to have a sense of the committee as, do I just let her tell us her will? Because if she turns it down again, we're back in the same.
Right, well, you know what? I would rather know ahead of time what her will is, so that if we need to change our minds about something, we have the time and the ability to do that.
Agreed.
so we should ask her ourselves what
Okay.
she was uncomfortable with, so that we are instructing our attorney. She's not.
That's why
I
agree
and,
with that.
and I would rather Mr. Anderson speak with her than her come before this body and give us direction, because that's kind of a no-no.
Well, and I think one thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that's difficult is that she holds the cards.
All right, just
And
That's my point.
And I understand it. You're more like asking for permission to have certain things in the plan is essentially what, unfortunately, the position that you're in.
And that's basically what I'm asking for, a sense of the committee, is what
Well-
you think about that.
Mr. Chairman,
Right.
there's no option here on the county attorney's review. So it would seem to me that what we ought to do is direct Mr. Anderson to ferret out what might be problematical, to argue like hell, to preserve our preferred position.
You already
And,
know how well that works.
well, you got rid of 4.
Anyways, that aside, yeah, we could ask him.
You've done amazing.
Yeah,
So what other date did you want?
December 6th. Does December 6th work?
I won't be
No.
here.
Okay.
The three of us won't be here.
20th.
20th of December. That's behind our scheduled date for deadline.
But we can move our deadline.
Okay. So how about we change Friday the 13th? We will address all other errors on I don't know what you want to call them, suggested edits
Okay.
from Christina, or suggested edits from Chris Baird, and suggested edits from Gavin Anderson.
We may have it ready by
Right. I'm just
This
giving
is
us
tentative.
then. But if we
Tentative.
have a tentative one after that on the.
Friday the 13th, and then tentative on December 20th as our deadline then.
Deadline.
I expect Christmas presents.
I have a white
So
elephant gift.
I'm assuming, Ruth, that someone's going to make a motion.
Okay,
to add-
I'm going to make a motion that we change December 13th to go over any suggested edits
Moved
that
by Chris
anyone may have, Chris, Christina,
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Anderson, and then our deadline is going to be moved to December 20th.
Second.
Yeah, final draft. So we've got a motion
As a
that
meeting, yeah.
we're going to add, or we're going to modify the topic on the 13th to be focusing on edits presented by Gavin Anderson, Chris Baird, Christina Sloan, and then setting a deadline for December 20th, study committee meeting at 12 noon. Any discussion on that?
Just one quick thing, that 45 days out, I calculated, 45 days ahead of March 8th is January 23rd,
Okay.
which
That
is a
gives us-
Thursday, so the Friday before that is January 17th.
So we'd be a month ahead.
But if we had to fix something,
Right.
if we found something else.
45 days, you wanna.
Well, you have to remember the holidays are happening in the middle of all that too, so you're,
Wait, we're 30 days before the 45
The letter of
days.
the law is,
Right.
no, I'm just saying.
Right, so
I get
that
it.
might be enough time.
That'll be 45 days plus 2 weeks.
Well, so have something to read over
2
Christmas.
weeks.
Okay. Walt?
Second?
Yep. Seconded.
Oh, sorry.
Any other discussion?
So who seconded that?
Bob. Well, really it was Bob, then Walt said it afterwards again. He threw
Oh,
in the second.
I'm fine
You're
with
fine.
that.
All in favor of changing the topic on the 13th meeting to be revision of edits and adding a new meeting on December 20th for it to be a rough deadline of the plan, optional plan?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
So theoretically, we could vote on that, and then we're gonna have even more than the 45 days.
Yeah, we'll have 2 weeks. If she went to the end of her deadline, we'd have 2 weeks to fix. Okay. Any other discussion on setting the deadline? It's set for December 20th. Hearing none. E, consideration of study committee communications with members of state legislators and/or representatives of the Utah Association of Counties. Okay. We've mentioned this a couple different times. We have some ears or some presence or somebody knows something about what's happening at the state legislature. I have no idea what's happening there. But this keeps coming up. I don't know if we would have the desire to send them a letter with errors that they have in it and ask for clarifications on some of those things. Jeremy.
I would like to make a motion that once we're done with this process, that if there is any hiccups caused by HB 224, that we have Mr. Anderson draft a letter to the legislative body.
Yes.
We want that afterwards.
Well, as we're going through this process, what we find.
I don't understand
Hang
why.
on. We've got a motion to draft a letter after we're completed with the process to, say it again.
Quite late in the legislative process.
That's true. So
So
let's.
we've got that motion.
Well, let me amend that motion
Okay, we've got
to,
to amend
let us have Mr. Anderson draft a letter with some of the,
Hiccups.
what do you want to call
Concerns that have
it?
come up.
Concerns and issues that we have experienced with the bill. And if you feel comfortable, we know what they are. So if you can draft that within the next, month.
I could bring a draft, I could send you a draft in a couple of days.
I
Yeah.
think
Awesome.
the
I'm
legislature.
okay with that. I'm just
Hang
thinking
on,
ahead
so
to
finish your motion.
what else we're gonna run into.
So
So I
you-
make a motion that Mr. Anderson,
Update the
Up-
legislature on our process.
write a draft, updating the legislative body of the state about our
Concerns and issues.
concerns and issues
With HB
relate with HB.
And you intend that to go out
From
over
the
our
committee.
signature, yes?
From us, from the
From the
committee.
committee.
From the
the
committee,
committee.
yes, from the committee, with what he's experienced and with us agreeing to that letter, also that draft.
In other words,
Yeah.
it'll be on an agenda.
Okay, so
It'll
we've
go
got,
on the
hang
agenda,
on,
that's
we've got a motion before us that we would have Mr. Anderson draft a letter updating the legislature about concerns and issues that we have with HB 224 from us as a governing, or us as a body.
Second.
Seconded by Marcy. Discussion. Judy, then Mr.
Aren't we
Anderson.
the last dying calf of 224
No,
in the state of Utah?
no, it won't be.
Not at all.
Not at all.
There's several counties, Utah County's got a real mess, San Juan
Is
County.
it mandated we're gonna be?
No,
Yep.
San
We're the
Juan.
ones with the gun to our head.
Yeah, we've got the gun to our head, but there's, let's see, Weber County, Utah County,
San Juan.
San Juan's coming
and
up.
Morgan is still
Yeah.
tinkering with theirs,
Well-
and San Juan are the big players. That's
But
5.
HB 224 is generally applicable also.
Yeah, it just
So,
doesn't have the gun.
like for instance, the district issue would apply to anybody who
Yeah.
decided to go through
Because
the process.
I can tell you right now, the authors of the bill did not foresee those consequences. And in speaking with the authors of the bill, their intent is not what the letter of the law is. I can tell you that right now. So, I mean, so there, and the more that we can give them feedback, and the less, and Utah County looks like it maybe go before a judge. That's getting ugly, which, whatever. But this is our reality. We're not the only ones experiencing issues with this bill, but the more feedback they have, the quicker they can act upon it.
That's good.
Let me ask a question. Are we advocating for any particular change? Is this just an informative letter like, hey, HB 224 sucks, we hate it, we're complaining?
These are the problems
Or,
we've had
or is
because
this
of it.
something that we're going forward and saying, we would really like to see change in HB 224. We want to change X, Y, and Z.
Well,
Walt and you, Marcy.
I think it ought to be specific. We found these specific problems, and one of them is, what are the powers of this study committee?
Well,
We're not
whether,
an
in
advisor.
particular, whether the legislature intended to delegate the authority to draw districts.
So I.
Well, no, not just districts. I mean, she's
She
saying
says
we're
we're
an advisory
advisory.
committee, and what does that mean? What is
Well,
this
it's
committee mean?
clear.
I asked Gavin, if we're not an advisory committee, what are we actually in law? And that's not clear
What
in
was the
this thing.
intention? But I think we identify the questions and the issues. And I
Exactly.
think for some of them, we can also say,
This
this
would have
is
helped.
what we see as a solution, or this is where, we feel like we would have liked to have been able to move forward and our hands were tied.
When, can I ask a point of clarification? And then Bob, when is the legislature session beginning and ending?
Begins
the middle of
January.
Okay.
But everything's decided before then.
Yeah, if you want a letter to the legislature, if you want a letter,
We need to go
Hang on.
now.
Mr. Anderson?
if you want to send a letter to the legislature that have any potential for being meaningful, you've got to get it to them in November.
Would it be
Okay.
possible for you to do that in a couple of days to get it
Yes,
to us?
sir.
Okay.
And I'd
So-
We
recommend,
have to have a vote on that, yes.
I've got some suggestions too that I could just relay
That'd
to
be
Gavin,
great.
but they're technical from my end of things about how the process doesn't line up with the regular election code, and that causes a lot of conflict in how I operate, and so I think some of the deadlines and timeframes need to be amended to.
You might want to also take that through UAC and the county clerks.
that's
Yeah.
the other question for the committee is, do you want to coordinate with the Association of Counties? I have no idea where they're going to be on this.
I think, my opinion is, we should do our letter in regards to the problems we have,
Yes.
and the problems that our clerks has brought forward, and so that they know firsthand what they, unintended consequences possibly,
Right.
and just firsthand, this is what we intend, this is what we assumed, which I shouldn't use that word because then you know what that means. But, that this is what we thought we were supposed to do, and this is what we did, and then this is the way we were, and I'm sorry, this does not mean to be disrespectful, where we were shot down, because we really had worked really hard to get this, and these are the things that we thought we were supposed to do. And so could please clarify, and maybe, amend or correct, or be aware.
Walt?
Having worked some in DC with Congress and then in Texas with the legislature, they don't want to hear that doesn't work good. They want to know specifically what we need to fix, and they actually appreciate that if you come in with it, especially from a group like us, who they have tasked with making this work. And if we can be objective and tell them the things that didn't work, they'll fix it. I have no doubt about that. Yeah.
Be positive and constructive.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
We right now are being looked at like, we're
Magnifying glass.
we're the ranch hands on the farm that are doing the work, and they want to know how it's going with all of the rules and regulations set aside. And so this is where we're at. We're in the mire, and they want to know, and they're curious about it. And I could go and lobby all day long. I'd probably get some things changed. But the reality of it is, if we have something from this body that says this is a consensus, that this is a consensus of what we've all experienced, and it's not just me playing politics, it will carry a lot more weight.
So,
Marcy, then myself, then Walt.
so would it be okay if, as individuals, we each emailed Gavin with our perceptions
Yeah.
of what didn't work and what we think might be a solution, and he can somehow take a look at that and collate it and summarize it and come back with a document for us to approve that we can work on.
My thoughts also is the fact of being transparent. I think one of the big things that caused this whole thing was, closed door meetings, lobbyists, things like that. And I think it's really nice that if we can have something we all agree on and send it to them and be able to say, look, in plain daylight, these are the things we don't like, instead of doing it, because we could do it through the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or through another organization. But I think it comes a lot cleaner coming from us who have, no dog in the fight. We're not council members. And I think it comes from, after somebody else like that, it might be looked at differently. And the only downside is we might not have the connections up north. They might just say, it's a study committee, why do we care?
Well,
But that's the only downside.
Actually, if one or two of you could go up to any of the committee meetings, that has a kind of effect to have private citizens
Probably.
come to the legislature. They get tired of hearing from lobbyists and attorneys and governmental officials. If a citizen showed up, that's going to be very meaningful.
I think we can get that
Well-
up, yeah.
Marcy, sorry, Cricket?
Well, and I think the point being, and you've said, is that we all got along very well. We're all very different walks of life and we still come together and talk these things through. So I think coming from us as a committee is very unbiased and probably has more weight than UAC or whatever.
Could we bother you for a schedule of when they meet next? For that particular committee? And we can see if.
Change of government.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
interims, I think interims come on, cease in November. I'll double check it.
Because then we could see if there's any council members
I have
to drive out.
I have a question for the clerk. Would lobbying the legislature be an allowable expense under the county's appropriation? You don't have to answer it right now, but it's something I'd appreciate you would consider. It seems to
I
me
don't know
no.
if,
It seems like we'd have to go up on our own hook, but
I don't know. I mean, relaying, I think there's a difference between lobbying and relaying parts of the code that you
Right.
find unclear or not copacetic
with
with other
that.
parts of the code. But if you were to lobby, in a partisan way or any kind of way like that, I didn't get the notion that that's what you're wanting to do. If you just drafted a letter saying this is our experience trying to work with this bit of code and this is where we feel like the code could be improved according to our interpretation of your intent, then I don't see that necessarily as lobbying. It's just feedback on.
well, guessing their
legislation.
intent is shaky. I mean, here's an example. I think it's very clear that it would be very helpful if the legislature made concrete whether or not they're delegating the authority to district to study committees.
Yeah.
Um,
But you don't have to lobby one way or the other. You could just say it's
Right,
unclear to
but
us, and you make
that's
that
kind of
clear.
as far as I think we should go
It's
in that.
clarification.
Right.
I agree with
Okay.
Yeah.
We're scared. This is really scary.
All right.
Disagree with you.
Other discussion on this, Mr. Anderson?
I think I sent you an email, and I described, there's going to be some limitations on what I can do in terms of that, in terms of my contract with the county. And so I have no problem with doing this letter. I think that's clearly within,
But going up in lobbying, or going
Yeah.
up in, pointing out where it falls short is not your neck of the woods.
that's going to really depend on whether Salt Lake County wants to take a position on it. And I have to tell you, if we get in too much conflict between the study committee and the county attorney, I know whose side our office is going to come down on. They're not going to want to oppose another county attorney, and we're a very, very small community. There's only 29 of us in the state, and my office would not look favorably.
We're
No, I
not
don't
going to
think
go
so.
there.
Which is one of the reasons I was shocked she went there. But that's just me.
What?
That she went with her stance on district, because there's 5 of their counties that,
That did it.
district
Oh.
attorneys that said it was okay. So neither here nor there.
All right, any other questions on how we're going to communicate with members of legislature and/or representatives of AC?
Well, I think
Would
we
you-
get a letter,
Marcy, oh, we still have to vote on it, sorry. Marcy?
we get a letter to Gavin, review his letter, and then decide what the next step is, whether that's.
I would absolutely appreciate emails from each of you as to what your particular concerns are.
And may I suggest, I imagine County Attorney Sloan herself, who had to study all this, has a
Yes.
lot of input. So I
think
think
her
those who've
letter-
been, even I, who wrote the original resolution for the county council back in March of 2018, I ran into things where they referenced a code that was completely the wrong code.
Yeah, I think her concerns shouldn't come through us. I think she's separate from
Okay.
us. Because she's having an independent review of us, she should be an independent party.
This-
Any other discussion on the motion before us to have Mr. Anderson draft a letter updating them concerns, issues?
Assuming that you'll want this for action next meeting, which is
Yes.
October, whatever it was.
Yes.
Not 4th, but the next.
So that's,
Do we have 10 minutes to read?
Yes.
any other discussion on that? Okay, do we have to vote on that?
Yes.
Yep, all right. All in favor of having Mr. Anderson draft a letter updating the state legislature regarding concerns and issues with HB 224 from this committee, please raise your hand. All against? Unanimous. All right, any other discussion items or conversation on item E? If not, we'll go to consent agenda items, action items, none. Discussion items, none. Discussion and possible action on study strategy, none. Public hearing, possible action items, none. Future considerations. Anything else that we didn't bring up that anybody else wants to talk about? Now is the time. Mr. Anderson?
This is probably not my bailiwick, but I know we had a motion, which passed a couple of weeks or a month ago that said, we're gonna put off matters of public, meetings, outreach, voter information pamphlet. You wanna bring those back up again? Bearing in mind that the elections, especially the election for officers, is gonna be far after the study committee's gone.
Yeah, oh, that's your thing. That you
Well,
want to
no,
talk
well,
to.
so, I mean, relevant next steps, it would be my intention, and I asked the clerk if we could do this, is once we have a optional plan that's been approved by the county attorney, to actually set up a public information campaign for September, October, November of 2020 with relevant information and bulletins to the public. Not, I guess they can't be from the study committee, but we can put it out there. Do you see what I'm saying? I understand the Republicans
Chris
and
and
the
Jeremy,
Democrats can put that information out there, but how are we gonna put this back in front of the voters in a very real way?
It's going to be on the ballot.
Chris?
Well, and I also
gonna be on the
thought that,
ballot.
wasn't the county, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the county, once it was approved and our job's done, and it's got the rubber stamp, wasn't the county then to have a public hearing about it?
Chris?
I don't think there's a public hearing. I just was going to point out that the HB 224 it establishes a deadline for when you have to get your plan done, and that's it.
Yeah,
It doesn't say that you have to seesaw operations at March 8th. I know some of you don't want to go past that, but I'm just saying that the only bit of code that I read says that you have to have your plan submitted by that deadline, a year within your first meeting. And that's all it says. It doesn't say anything about you can't come back and do any informational.
Public hearing,
So,
open.
I mean, I would be for that. If we are allowed to do that, to be able to, in October, September and October, like just do exactly what we did, the 4 places or 5 places were in their district, so they could come ask us questions.
Right, and I mean, I'd be willing to work on that with the subcommittee and make a presentation to this group at some point
After.
after we have the plan, and I also think that, we have to consider the budget and
Right.
what we have in our budget, if we have anything.
Can I ask 2 questions real
We
quick?
will be budgeting this, like, next month, so.
Two questions. One, could we create a subcommittee to continue on of 3 members to continue on and do advertisement with a specific goal to advertise or to put out information in pamphlets, printing, et cetera, whatever is needed for when this comes on the ballot.
I think clearly so. It may not carry a lot of weight. It's not
Sure.
going to have the weight of the statutory process, but any 3 or 4 or 5, 6 public spirited citizens can do anything they want. Another thing we ought to consider is whether we put in the transition part of the plan or the recommendation, a recommendation to the county council, the existing county council, that they bend every effort to have public hearings, voter information pamphlet. Voter information pamphlet is not mandatory, so that's a decision somebody's going to have to make.
Cool. I think we can do that.
Other comments on other things for future considerations, additional relevant steps in the process?
Yes. Wondering about, since I work with county council, will there be, what's the next step with regarding the county council and districts? Are we,
Nothing.
we wait for
We're waiting
Attorney
for
Sloan?
waiting for a discussion, and I think Marcy said she wanted to hear the result, I guess, of Chris's thoughts on statute being kind of pointing at one thing, and
Well, I don't know. I mean, I looked at that again, and you know, if like I say, if the county attorney provides a favorable report, I'm required to do certain things.
right.
But I also saw that the legislative body is also required to call the election, so that kind of alleviated my concern that at least that part of it is mandatory if it goes through, and so
So that's a part of HB 224 that,
and so
Nailed
that
it.
yeah, that's I mean that is helpful, because if I'm required to do certain things as a result of that action, obviously, you know, a legitimate election would have to be called. It doesn't say that it's a special election. It doesn't actually use that term, but you know, it just says the legislative body shall call an election at the next regular or municipal general election, and that's all it says. It doesn't say special election, but anyway, that's relieved my concern, and so that part of it is makes me feel better. So,
Mr. Chair, I do have one more comment.
Yes.
Just, I think you all know this, and I think it's already been in the newspapers, that County Attorney Sloan did address the county council and did tell them it will be their job to do districting.
And that's not our place.
well, see, the thing though is it's not actually their job. That's my problem, is that
Right.
the only thing in code says that they may redistrict. There's nothing in HB 224 or anywhere else that says that they shall do this thing.
that's
They
a
have,
constitutional issue.
well, and I think that
is what
I
the county attorney
assume,
says.
That's the argument.
yeah, well, I
Yeah.
disagree with that, and you know, it's,
Doesn't matter.
yeah, I know,
Well,
it doesn't.
I think the issue on
It's true.
districting, I think it'll be something we'll discuss and we'll decide. I think there's good arguments for killing them all, and there's good arguments for keeping them, but I think from what I've heard, and I think Mr. Anderson can confirm this, there is a lot of moving pieces about it. There's possibility for litigation if it doesn't get resolved. There's possible for litigation even if they draw it and people don't like the way it comes out. So I think it'll be something we'll discuss in detail. Mr. Anderson?
Just one other thing, sometimes we think the only potential hiccup down the road is litigation. But what happens when you have a county attorney 10 years from now, a county council 10 years from now who says, we don't want to have a 2/3 vote on that thing, we can read in such a way. So that's a bigger issue.
Right.
And it can become a partisan issue, and
Will you specify, I got some confused, there's some confused faces. What you mean about the 2/3, about going into the optional plan and,
Well, yeah.
about amending an optional plan.
Right.
So, well, that's the sticking point that I brought up with Christina, is that the 2/3 vote only applies to the optional plan itself. So if it's illegal to put the districts, the actual geographic districts, into the optional plan, then they're not going to be subject to the 2/3 supermajority. Even though that particular bit of code clearly seems to infer that it's relating very specifically to geographic districts, because what would, you know, the bicentennial reapportionment refer to if it wasn't referring
Once
to
the
that?
voters adopt the optional plan, it's no longer an optional plan, guys. It's the new form of government.
Well, once there's officers.
No, it's considered an optional plan because it's not a three-person
Oh,
commission.
okay.
That's the definition of the optional plan.
You know, the optional plan becomes an organic document like a constitution. It's It's printed up, it's codified in your ordinance book, and it stays there forever. And then if somebody wants to change that optional plan, then you get into this question of whether it needs a citizen vote or a 2/3 majority.
So,
if
but
they
yeah.
deem it not necessarily material enough to be
Exactly.
a voter issue, they could just go through and.
Well,
Unless
I mean,
it's called out specifically, and some things are.
so it's, I mean, I could read it again, but I think that you can't change the makeup of the council. And so the question of whether or not you'd have to go back to the voters is relatable to whether or not the seats are by district or not. But it seems to me to give the ability to shift the districts by 2/3 vote within the optional plan. But that's conflicting with what Christina's saying, that can't even be a component of the optional plan. So, I mean, you see where I'm kind of, it doesn't make sense to me that they would say that in the code, that you can, by 2/3 vote, reapportion districts if districts are not even allowed to be a part of the plan.
Numbering them, like actually drawing them out.
Drawing them, yeah, because reapportionment bicentennial reapportionment clearly refers to the one person, one vote, which refers to geographic boundaries on a map, not whether or not the seats are by district or not, because that has nothing to do with reapportionment. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm just reading the what I consider to be the intent of the legislature, and so
And
Bob,
reapportionment
after
suggests
all.
you have an existing district to reapportion.
within the optional plan, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was getting at.
I'm not,
Okay, we've got Bob and then Jeremy.
Maybe,
Wow.
maybe it'd be helpful if we all sent the chairman questions that we would like answers from the county attorney on, so that we don't find ourselves in a meeting with her and coming up with questions that she hasn't had a chance to consider.
But I do think we need to use Mr. Anderson. Also, I know, and this is, I know this puts you in a position where it makes you look, I don't know, a go-between, but if we're going to ask questions, we should use our own attorney first, and maybe use him, to, like you mentioned earlier, to communicate with Christina so that they can boil
I
it down.
think
to
that'd
the
be
market.
useful.
I agree with that, and that's a typical attorney-client relationship. I just feel like I'm a complete fifth wheel in this whole process with
We
You're not
know,
Which is
feel that
disappointing.
us.
we know.
Well, how do we fix that?
Guarantee you
Because
do
we
that
don't
better.
want you to feel that way.
Yeah, Gavin,
How do we fix that?
99% of the plan that you helped us develop has been found in compliance with Constitution and state law.
I mean, I think the big issue that we're having is the big issues are issues that's where the disagreement is, and he is professional to say, I will, yield to Ms. Salone in these aspects, and I think
Well,
that's what the frustration is.
I have to.
I know,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's the
and
frustration.
so, and my question to the legislature is,
Do we extend
was
the vote
this
or
your
to the suit?
intention to allow this independent body to do all this work and come up with this plan and then submit it to the county attorney, who basically now has the authority
Clearly,
to give it yay or nay?
That's real
That
clear.
was-
She's
that's-
the attorney for the county.
right.
Okay, so,
No, for the county.
organization. For the county.
so it, and that was, in my opinion, oxymoron,
Yeah.
that the county can have no opinion, but then their attorney has to approve it. No, that shouldn't have happened. It should have went to the state legislature or someone else outside of our county to make sure we weren't violating any of the codes, and not, because she's not unbiased. She's not.
And I think
Some history
probably,
on that, if anyone's interested. That's the
All right.
problem with being around for 40 years.
Right.
Things happen within your lifetime, but it's still a long time ago.
But
let Mr. Anderson finish, and then Walt.
Just a little background. When Grand and Morgan changed their plans, I can't describe how outraged the executive director of UAC was. Brent Gardner, he's long gone, long retired. They actually ended up suing Morgan over their plan. That lawsuit didn't go very far. And you can argue that's not a very good role for an association of counties to do.
To sue its members?
But he said this has got to be reviewed for legality. The Morgan and Grand County plan should not have gone through, somebody should have reviewed it for legality. He floats that to the AG, and the AG says, no way we're gonna do that.
Yeah, but that was in relation to, because when we adopted our plan, and then Morgan basically took our plan and adopted it also. Yeah, and so, it wasn't about that form of government. It was about the additional components that we added in that had nothing to do with what was in statute. And those were term limits, recall, and nonpartisan elections. And so those, we kind of invented those. And it didn't have anything to do with any problem with statute, because the general, I mean, we're not a council manager, and we're not an expanded commission. We're what's referred to general county modified. And that's not a great name, but that's what we are. And so it didn't say anything in there about any of those three things. And I think that's what the lawsuit was about, not about the form of government we chose, but about adding those components in.
Well,
I just, we can go back and forth on motive and all that kind of thing. The biggest concern I have was, for example, missing, the county council has nothing to do with reviewing any of this, so that was a clear miss. But the reason there's a interpretation issue is the damn law isn't clear. And if she's having to interpret it, it should be crystal clear what it means. Do we have the authority to redistrict or not? We think we do. I had an old Texas lawyer one time told me, because I was talking to him about implied, the law implies this. He said, if it ain't wrote, it doesn't exist. And so it needs to be wrote, and I know that's improper. It needs to be clear, and that's why we're going to have you do this, so that won't help us this time, but
Might help someone.
it will.
any
And there's
other,
some headaches coming down the road.
Bob?
Yeah.
Trust me. And they're much
I'm
bigger
really
counties.
troubled by committee members on the record attributing biased motives to elected officials. And, Mr. Chairman, I think you need to caution us whenever we inadvertently do that.
And I don't want to I don't want to go into the weeds here, but there have been things that have been in public records, emails and things, that have made people wonder and question. I mean, when I presented, for example, at the county council meeting, there were a couple individuals, I'm not going to say who, really pushed me as to why we didn't have a commission. So there are reasons why I think individuals will say that. I'll caution people not to say
Thank
things
you.
that are improper, or maybe hedge it with, in my opinion, I don't think they should have done X, Y, and Z. You don't want to run afoul with slandering somebody or libeling somebody. But I do understand there are some reasons why people are doing it, and I understand, because I've seen some things that are questionable. But I understand that's a desire. We should be independent, we should be open, and we shouldn't be malice, so to speak. So,
Yeah, we shouldn't be casting aspersions on elected officials. That's
well,
a
they put
mistake.
themselves in a position of public sphere, they're public
No, we can
individuals, and they
disagree
take-
with what they did.
I don't think anybody said, anyways, I don't think anybody said anything, but don't say anything improper about a person, etc. That is,
Did you call me that?
so,
We don't know what their intent was.
there you go. So, anything else for future considerations? Anything? Going once, going twice, gone. Do we have a motion to close this thing out?
Motion to close.
Seconded by
Everyone.
everyone. All in favor?
Everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
And happy Public Lands Day to everybody.
And two more things. Walt's giving a presentation tonight.
At 6.
I am at 6.
On what?
And we also got a thank you note, if you want to read it, I'll pass it around. It's from somebody in the future.
Oh,